I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA.
Chapter 1. Hybrid in a New World. Hybrid in a New World. It was the middle of the night. The clear sky glittered with thousands of stars with a moon that was bright and clear. A single massive castle similar to Russian aesthetics, surrounded by walls, towers both pointed and domed despite a crumbled tower on the right side, topped with jade and gold on the roofs, stood serenely protected in the center of an even larger city. This time with tall regal buildings of a more Central European aesthetic, a section that was protected by even higher walls that only the castle stood higher than. Outside of those walls was a sprawling city with various canals for rivers and streets for land transports, homes and businesses, some still lit with the inhabitants awake, others dark for the peaceful rest of the night. A serene picture of the city was destroyed as three figures broke through a section of the castle, heading for the walls surrounding the city. Damn it! A young orange-haired teen cursed as he flew further away from the castle, a woman riding on ice and a man cloaked in electricity chasing after him. The teen wore a slim black robe, lined with light blue on the edges and a series of black XS going down the front to keep it together. On his arms were several bands ending in claw-like gloves. Inside those robes was a high-collared white shirt with more blue edges and black pants. On his hip were two katana and a pentacle bracelet with a skull in the center on his wrist. He landed on the wall and was about to jump off the other side when a lightning bolt struck in front of him, revealing a man. "End of the road," he growled. "You will not threaten the peace here." He was a tall, middle-aged man with spiky blonde hair and blue eyes in dark gray armor. On his arms were a pair of golden gauntlets that had piston poles on the forearms that cackled with electricity. Behind the teen was a beautiful woman with long icy blue hair, light gray military apparel, a tattoo on her chest, black crosses on her cap and belt, and a huge rapier blade. "Is this really a god of death?" she asked, leveling her blade at him. "I'm disappointed, Ichigo Kurosaki." The teen traded looks between the two, never looking concerned, only annoyed. His mind raced back to how he got into this situation. Exposition and flashback. It all went back to that rainy day in July. He was just a kid walking home with his mother. He thought he saw a girl by a raging river and ran to help her, only for it to be a monster known as a hollow. When that thing attacked, a pillar of light struck his mother and she lost consciousness. Ichigo's powers awakened that day and saved his mother's life, though now she was in a coma. From there, he learned his heritage as a soul reaper, a Quincy, a hollow, and about the villains that threatened existence as he knew it, Aizen and Ichwach. Desiring to live up to his name as a protector, he trained in everything he could and become as strong as he possibly could to stop his enemies. Eventually, he made his way to the Soul Society, where the Soul Reapers concentrated their power and warned their leader, Genryusai Yamamoto, of Aizen and Ichwach. Aizen was a captain-turned-traitor that sought to rule all the afterlife and sacrifice any in order to do so. After a long time of consolidating their forces, Aizen waged a war with Soul Society, ending in Ichigo's victory over the traitor and absorbing his powers. Now only Ichwach remained. Ichigo continued to train and master everything his masters had to teach him, but he lacked only one thing: experience. Which brings him to a conversation with the leader of the only group outside of Yamamoto's command, the Zero Squad's Ikaib Hayasub. "Ichigo, I have a proposition for you, lad," the old monk said to Ichigo over the phone. "Answer this: what is a Soul Reaper?" Not thinking too much about it, Ichigo gave the answer that was drilled into his head for years. "A balancer that safeguards the equilibrium of souls in existence." "And can you keep to that duty?" he suddenly asked, throwing Ichigo off slightly. "Can you focus on that duty and not interfere? Can you be a Soul Reaper? Here's a test for you. Remember the Valley of Screams? The dimensional pockets in the void between dimensions as a result of billions of souls and their energy concentrating there," Ichigo guessed. It had been a long time since he needed to have any concern for those spaces. Sometimes they form their own worlds, even become populated as an alternate living world to the one you live in, he explained, surprising the hybrid with the knowledge that alternate realities could exist. "We found one such world that is in the midst of a war. Your mission is to go there and be a Soul Reaper. Don't use your powers for one side or the other. Do not directly interfere with their affairs, and reap the souls of the dead. Some might have potential to join the Gotai, others will simply wish to pass on, but you are to not interfere. Am I going to have a gigi? Ichigo asked, already thinking about the endless possibilities of the world he would see. Ichigo laughed kind-heartedly. No, a gigi won't be necessary. Something else, he answered. A new set of clothes are being made to restrain your Ryatsu, so these people won't disintegrate from being too close to you, and something special. A ring that will give you a physical form when worn, but will return you to spirit when off. Granted, it will weaken you by some degree, but think of that as extra training, he said jovially. This sounds like it'll be more trouble than it's worth, the hybrid said dryly. Maybe, Ichigo, but you lack life experience as a man, soldier, and soul reaper. What do you say? Ichigo thought about for a good while. Soul Society could handle things without him, and there is nothing wrong with more experience. Besides, he's fought against would-be world destroyers, murderous psychopaths, and went to hell. What could this new world possibly throw at him? Bring it on. Entering the new world. Armed and carrying the gifts of his teachers and wearing powerful seals on his being, the hybrid went through a specially made dangai leading him to the new world. The run took him hours, many uneventful hours, before reaching the end and coming to his destination. True to form, he was in the inconvenient and dangerous place to come out of, thousands of feet up in the sky. Of course, this is where I end up, Ichigo thought bitterly as he began to fall, the wind ripping at his form. Well, it's not like I'm not used to, he continued until he noticed his ring began to shine. Almost immediately, he felt his entire body tighten and his heart seize before feeling his strength leaving his body. Granted, it will weaken you by some degree. The words of the old monk replayed in his head. Are you kidding me? I feel like my body is made of lead, with multiple tons of weight on my hands and feet, with what seems like 20 times natural gravity. How weak am I? He thought worriedly, trying to muster up his Heiran Kyaku to slow his descent. The moment he connected to the Raisi of the world, he felt like throwing up. It's like the soul of this whole world is toxic. Just what the hell is happening here? He thought as his vision began to blur as vertigo set in. Fighting to keep from blacking out, he saw himself falling straight towards a majestic castle, and what seemed to be hundreds of hollows appearing before fleeing just as quickly. The last thing the young Soul Reaper saw was the tower he slammed into. Oh, Watilda! Ichigo groaned, smashing through floor after floor of the tower, until he ended at what seemed to be the lowest level. This could have had a better start, he said, pushing himself up out of the crater he was in with debris falling off his body and all around him. He shook his head in an effort to get the world to stop spinning and get his bearing. He saw many spears, swords, axes, even rifles and cannons. Did I land in a Renaissance era or something? He asked before catching a new scent. Is that gunpowder? He looked over to a barrel that was cracked open, with an oil lantern hanging above it. Then the lantern dropped. Shit, he said, just before the lantern shattered and the room exploded. Inside the throne room. Chaos reigned in the throne room, a young child on the seat of power looking scared and confused, a large rotund man with a thick white beard demanding answers, and a spiky blonde man issuing orders. The chaos began when they suddenly saw weird creatures appear throughout the castle, phasing through the wall like they were non-existent, and their unearthly howls sending chills down everyone's spines. They were there and then gone, but the people inside demanded answers. General Budo, do they still have nothing? The child asked, barely keeping his tears at bay. The blonde man bowed to the boy and spoke, with regret coloring his voice. Still nothing, my liege? For what value it holds, it doesn't seem like the Revolutionary Army is attacking. That's all that we have, the general said, giving the child some relief, until the fat man next to him spoke up. All that you have at your disposal, and this is all you have to tell, he said rather condescendingly. Palace security is supposed to be your responsibility. Not that it would have done any good, a blue-haired beauty said, marching into the room with 3 men dressed in black following her. They couldn't be harmed or touched. Nothing we did was effective, she reported, shocking everyone in the room. Truly, General Esdith? Surly you jest? The fat man said, begging for it to be a joke. But the woman shook her head. It's as if they were spirits honest, she answered, sounding bored despite the situation. Just then, the palace shook as if something hit it. What now? Honest yelled out as the child emperor tried curling into himself, hiding from the terrors attacking his home. Esdeath, take a contingent and find out what that was. I'll stay here and protect his majesty, Budo ordered, with Esdeath nodding. You lot, come with me, she ordered a group of soldiers, bearing a smirk that promised pain for whatever prey she could find. They ran out to the armory and munitions building, one of several in the castle, reaching it just in time for another explosion to bring it crumbling down. Well, there goes my fun, she thought in disappointment, not sensing any attack or opponents to fight. Start investigating. Find out what happened, she ordered, the men scrambling to obey. Seconds later, she heard the movement of stones and wood that wasn't from the soldiers digging away at the tower, but from deeper underground. Show. She heard someone speak before the massive pile of debris was blasted off, revealing a young orange-haired man. Definitely one of my rougher landings. He groaned out, getting to his feet and pulling out bars that were stabbed into his body. He treated the tower collapse like he was getting out of bed, stretching and shaking as if to wake up. The teen looked up to General. Yo, my name's Ichigo Kurosaki. Where am I and who are you? Back to the throne room. Welcome Ichigo Kurosaki, the Prime Minister said jovially. After introducing himself, Esdeath brought him to the throne room and reported exactly what she found. A teenage boy fell from the sky into the munitions tower and survived the explosion before freeing himself from the pile of debris. Everyone in the room was shocked, but Honest decided to capitalize on the chance. Welcome to the seat of power of our mighty empire that has held strong for over 1,000 years. I am Prime Minister Honest, Chief Advisor to our great emperor. He gestured to the small child, who seemed very excited by Ichigo's presence, but still held himself as regal as possible. This is our Lord Emperor Makoto, the great General Budo at the foot of the stairs. Budo nodded in acknowledgement while glaring at Ichigo as if to dare him to try anything. And you've already met General Esdeath. A pleasure, Ichigo said, giving a cheerful smile to each and every person in there, not in the least bit concerned about his safety. I'm Ichigo Kurosaki, Shinigami, he said, earning small gasps from the group. Shinigami. As in Death God? Esdeath asked, more and more interested in the boy. I prefer Soul Reaper, Ichigo answered. I guide the souls of the dead to their afterlife. Are those what those monsters were earlier? The Emperor asked, surprised that any human could become such monstrous creatures. Souls? Well, yes, Ichigo said, scratching his head in embarrassment. There are two kinds of souls, pluses and hollows. Pluses are the ghosts of the departed, still wholly conscious of who and what they are. Hollows are what happen when they give in to hate and despair, becoming starving beasts that live only to devour other souls. So they're dangerous creatures, Esdeath guessed, very intrigued by the idea. Hence your blades? They can be, but I've yet to encounter a foe I couldn't beat. Ichigo returned, still bearing that confident smile. Unbeknownst to the hybrid, the general's face was burning, and she felt her heartbeat go faster. Why did you fall out of the sky? Budo asked, making Ichigo's mood sour in response. Urahara. The Soul Reaper growled with enough venom that even Esdeath felt the need to back away. Then the teen shook his head. Sorry. The reason why is because of an asshole I know. Mr. Ichigo, if I may ask, could you lend us your power? The child emperor asked, earning surprised looks from the adults that shifted into anticipation. Right now, my country is plagued by a civil war that threatens to tear it apart. I've tried to lead as best as I could, but they seem to want nothing more than the destruction of the nation. If you could help, then maybe this country might know peace much sooner. He begged, and Ichigo felt how genuine he was. This kid wanted to be a good leader for his people, but how did it get so bad? His eyes shifted to Honest, and just looking at the man told him how vile and black his soul was. He didn't need the judgment of a Zanpakuto to tell him this man was going to hell. I'd love to help, he said, causing the kid to brighten with a smile, but I can't. The look of heartbreak nearly crushed him. This is a matter of the world of the living. My concern is with the dead. I'm merely here in a corporeal state because I need to live here, but I can't be directly involved in the affairs of the living. He turned to leave, missing Honest telling some of the guards to intercept him. But if I can offer any advice, stop trusting that prime minister of yours and see the state of your empire for yourself. he said before walking through the gates. With Ichigo. Well, that was something Ichigo thought as he wandered through the halls, quickly noting that he was being followed and surrounded. And now this, he sighed before stopping. Let me tell you here and now, this is a bad idea. You might want to turn back. He waited for all of 1 second before the group tried to attack him. The result was instantaneous as to the outside observer. Ichigo didn't move an inch, but the entire group of 20 would-be assassins ended up embedded in the walls and floor around the hybrid. Almost there, still feels heavy though, he thought to himself, before smelling ozone and feeling his hair stand up. He turned to the side, just in time to dodge an electrical punch from Budo. God or not, I will allow no violence in the palace, he roared as he threw lightning-fast punches at the hybrid, none of which connected. They were fast and strong, but they were also sloppy and undisciplined, suggesting that the man had almost no or any recent battle experience. Ichigo, having sparred with a woman that was nicknamed Flash Goddess for her speed his whole life, had little trouble dodging the man. Still moving too slow, he thought again, slowly getting used to the restraints on his body. During this time Ichigo took the chance to analyze the gauntlets on the man's arms, sensing that they were the source of the electricity he was using. Those aren't ordinary gauntlets. What are they? Ichigo asked, chancing that the man was naive enough about combat to tell him. This is my tegu, a Dreamlech, he answered, Ichigo not even believing his luck. It allows me to control lightning as I see fit. So I repeat, God or not, I will allow no violence in the palace. Ichigo disappeared from his sight and Budo felt a hand on his neck. There's a difference between allowing something and actually being able to do something about it. Ichigo scolded, spying an energy gauge on the gauntlet. And from the looks of things, if you didn't have this weapon, you'd be nothing. You're lacking in battle experience. He does, but I don't. He heard a sweeter voice say before sensing a series of icicles flying at him. He let go of the general and dodged out of the way, as Death marching toward him with a raised hand. I was hoping you'd start something. Fighting a god of any kind sounds like fun, she said with a smile. Now this one might be some cause for concern, Ichigo thought, getting a familiar Kenpachi vibe from the icy general. Can't fight in here, too crowded. Ichigo dropped to the ground, placing his hand on the floor. Bakudo #21, Senkienten. He quickly chanted, creating a massive explosion of smoke to distract the two. He then reinforced himself with his blood and Hyro and jumped through the rest of the palace, spying the wall surrounding the city district. Current time. Now here he is, his strength limited, in an unknown world, with two very powerful individuals trapping him between them, and they want to either capture or kill him. Neither of which was something he was going to allow to happen, but he needed to be careful. Lightning and ice, brute force and a creative combatant. He'd say it's like fighting Yoruichi and Toshiro at the same time, but he doubted either of them were as dangerous as his Shinigami allies. All the same, his head was still spinning, and he hasn't felt like he was truly used to his restraints just yet. Before we do this, tell me. Ichigo started, planning out how he was going to do this fight. Are you two the strongest the Empire has to offer? I'm known as the strongest in the Empire, as Death answered. He's known as the Great General and personally protects the palace for a reason. It was then that she noticed that Ichigo's hand was glowing with a swirling yellow energy. Good. Bakudo #4, Hinawa. Ichigo quickly said, flicking his glowing hand at Esdeath, who was ensnared in a rope of light. As he did that, Budo charged like lightning to punch Ichigo, only for the hybrid to disappear from between them. The result was him striking Esdeath and sending her off the wall. I've got a feeling you've been out of the game for far too long. Budo felt his blood boil at the thought of a teen, god or not, humiliating him in such a manner. You little brat, he roared, turning to the Soul Reaper and charging a ball of electrical energy. The second he shot it, Ichigo flashed next to the man and kicked him in the stomach. He was pushed back dozens of feet, feeling the air drained from his lungs, before gasping and roaring in anger again. He charged at Ichigo and began throwing punch after punch, black thunder clouds forming above the two, with Ichigo dodging and blocking every strike. You need to come up with a better strategy, Ichigo said before catching Budo's wrist and throwing him over the shoulder into one of the towers on the wall. You've seen that I match you in speed and in strength. Why do you keep using strategies that don't and will not work? Budo got up to glare at him, before smirking and making a lightning bolt crash down on the Soul Reaper. Ichigo had just a single second to look up and react. I admit, I've grown rusty during my time protecting the palace, Budo said as he made lightning continue to fall on Ichigo. Thank you for showing me this folly in my actions. I will work on that after you're dead. It was then he noticed that Ichigo did not scream one time. He was growling and a ball of yellow light was forming in his hands, the lightning concentrating there. What the? Hado-63, Reikoho, Ichigo called out, firing the energy back into the sky and dispersing the clouds. Budo gaped at the man, someone that completely redirected his attacks and still stood strong. Nice try, Budo, but I know how to redirect lightning. The great general brought his arms together, attempting to use his trump card ability, but Ichigo flashed in front of him again and Spartan kicked him in the chest. He was sent flying again and crashed through the debris pile from earlier. Tell me, are you on the Prime Minister's side? He asked the man as he dug his way back out. I know what Honest is doing to this nation, Budo answered. As soon as this rebellion is over, I will kill him and Esdeath. He promised, readying to shoot another ball of lightning, only to find a Dramlech was no longer on his arms. The gauntlets were on the ground behind Ichigo. And they know this? Ichigo guessed, Budo nodding his head while trying to think of how to retrieve his Tegu. You really are an idiot, aren't you? Ichigo said, picking up the gauntlets and giving them a closer examination. Tell me, Budo, what is the reason behind this rebellion? Budo found no reason not to tell him. If the Shinigami was going to be neutral, maybe the god of death could offer some wisdom. Widespread corruption at the hands of the Prime Minister. The general answered. He controls his majesty like a puppet and does as he pleases, squeezing the life out of the empire. Esdeath protects his rule and his corruption ensures another fight for her amusement. If that's the case, then why not work with the rebellion? Ichigo suggested, which enraged Budo. I serve the empire, I will never turn against, he roared before Ichigo punched him on the head. You are doing nothing, Ichigo scolded. While you stand there, feeling pride in keeping the palace safe, the empire you serve is dying from a parasite. That is worse than rebellion because you have done nothing to save your empire, Ichigo roared, making Budo think back on his inaction. At least do something to try and save it. Get that kid away from Honest, supply information to the rebels about the most corrupt officials, just stop doing nothing. The Soul Reaper pleaded, and the general felt ashamed. How much damage was the result of his own inaction? He found his Tegu tossed to him, looking up to Ichigo. Put those back on and grit your teeth. The general quickly obeyed while Ichigo raised his palm to the general's head, and soon the general passed out. Inamiri, you are such a useful Kaido, Ichigo said before sensing that his Heinawa was finally broken. Your turn now, Ichigo said as he ran along the wall, sensing that Esdeath was following him. Esdeath fight. That was mean of you, the icy general said after chasing Ichigo for a kilometer along the parapet of the wall until he stopped. Tying me up like that and then running off to have fun with that geezer Budo. I suppose only someone that's unfamiliar with me could be so audacious. Ichigo turned to face the woman. You truly are fascinating, Soul Reaper. Not many people can fight with Budo. I assume you have a weapon similar to his? Ichigo asked, looking back on the damage from fighting the other general. A few buildings were trashed by the lightning and the section of the wall itself seemed to be on the verge of crumbling. She's definitely a more experienced fighter, likely meaning that when we fight the damage will be a lot worse. What's more, I know that glint in her eyes. Kenpachi has the same look of battle lust, he thought as he tried to think of a way to keep the damage to a minimum. That weapon you speak of is called a Tegu, she answered, placing a hand over the tattoo on her chest. There are many different kinds of Tegu that only go to whoever is compatible with that Tegu. Budo's Dramlech can command lightning. I can control ice. To emphasize that point, she created several floating ice shards and aimed them at Ichigo. I see, Ichigo said, raising his hands. This means that there are weapons in this world similar to Zanpakuto, and every Zanpakuto was unique to their wielder. Meaning that every Tegu should be a unique weapon. She fired the icicles at Ichigo, who swerved around the barrage and flashed into Esdeath's guard. She merely grinned in anticipation of the fight before Ichigo shot his foot upward, which she blocked but was still sent flying upward. She winced from the throbbing in her arms from the attack, but she's never felt such elation. He's strong, stronger than anyone I've ever met, she thought as she summoned as giant pillar of ice. Hagelsprung, she called out as she threw the ice at the death god, who was waving his hands about very quickly. Suddenly, 4 glowing lights appeared around her. Ryubai no Jaman, Kigai no Jaman, Koko no Jaman, Hoyoku no Jaman. Ichigo chanted, surrounding her with a white gate, a black watermill, a green scale shield, and a red ring connected to an obelisk above her, all of which formed a large black box. Shiju no Seiman. The Soul Reaper finished, trapping her inside. She did not growl, merely glared in annoyance, as she tried using her ice to break out. However, the barrier held despite her efforts. You're only getting out of there when I'm done, Ichigo said, floating by the cube before opening one of the gates and entering inside. If you so want to fight, I'll give you one, he said, unsheathing one of his 2 Zanpakuto. Shatter, Kyoka Suijutsu. The blade pulsed with energy and Esdeath grinned in anticipation. Come then, god of death, she said, drawing her massive rapier. If I best you, will you be mine? That last one threw him off. Wait, what? He asked, looking at the girl he was certain was insane. It was merely a passing fancy at first, the idea of falling in love, she said, as if talking about whether. Could I fall in love? Who could I possibly love? I even began thinking of a list of qualities I would need for my lover. Powerful, fearless, came from outside the capital. You even had a nice smile. The only thing out of place is the age, she said with mild disappointment. I was hoping for someone younger than me, but I can work with an ageless deity. I'm 15, Ichigo blurted out, surprising Esdeath. I may be a Shinigami, but I am a teenager in human years. As for the other requirements, I may be holding back, but rest assured. If you are the Empire's strongest, none are more powerful than me, he said as Esdeath felt an intense pressure on her very soul, and she could only grin in excitement. This strong and still holding back, she needed to make him hers. Then let's go Ichigo, she roared, raising her hand and sending a wave of ice spikes toward the man she desired. Ichigo raised his own hand and made his counter. Hado-33, Sakutsui. He calmly cast as a massive torrent of blue flames burst from his hand, the fires matching the ice. Ye Lord? Mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws, he said as the flames burned even hotter and fiercer, now easily overtaking Esdeath's ice. Seeing no way to dodge, she created a thick barrier of ice and kept reinforcing it in the hopes of limiting the damage. For a Reaper of Souls, he has plenty of power. Hollows must really be powerful monsters, she thought with a growing smile. What I would give to hunt them. The collision of elements ended with a final burst of flame that shattered her barrier but also quickly dissipated, with Ichigo charging at her with his blade ready to cleave her in two. She brought up her rapier to cut him, or at least knock him aside, but Ichigo blocked and slid down the length of her sword while bringing his elbow to her gut. She caught it with her free hand and began to freeze him, but Ichigo quickly punched her in the throat and kneed her in the stomach. As suspected, she thought in ecstasy, only an equal would satisfy me. She slammed against the wall of the barrier and was getting ready to retaliate when she noticed Ichigo already in front of her. Ikatsu, he whispered before punching her in the gut as the barrier broke apart. This needs to end, Ichigo thought, his vision getting blurry from the strain of his seals working against him. If it wasn't for his ridiculous amount of Rise-He and stamina, he'd be on the receiving end of this fight. Hope you had fun, Esdeath, but I'm calling it quits for now, he called out, the ice mistress already back on her feet. You think I'll let this end? She asked, still smiling madly despite holding her ribs in pain. This is the first fight I've enjoyed in a long time. Give me more Soul Reaper. Maybe later, Ichigo said, knowingly angering the woman. I'm done for today. Bye, he said before charging off toward the north. I won't let you get away, she shouted before charging after the image of the Soul Reaper, never knowing that the real one was still on the parapet of the wall. Damn, she's as crazy as Zaraki, Ichigo groaned, grabbing his head in a futile effort to keep the world from spinning. I need to get somewhere safe. Need to. He stopped when he found a long raven-haired girl with red eyes in a black sleeveless dress and a blonde scantily clad woman, both looking at him in shock and amazement. And what do you two want? Illustrated Guide to Assassination. In the labs of Soul Society, one man in particular was tinkering away with his latest device while thinking of what kind of things his pupil would learn, and was glad he managed to condense a Rise-He 3D printer down to such a size for the hybrid. Then he suddenly sneezed and felt a chill go down his spine. I think Ichigo might be mad at me. Shinigami and Assassins. At the palace. Are you sure, Prime Minister? The young Makoto asked as he entered his bedchambers. I've never left the walls of the palace before. Maybe I should see the state of the empire with my own eyes, he said, while crawling into his bed as Honest continued to talk with him. Your Majesty, the man started. He said so himself. He is a reaper of the dead, not a lord of the living. What would he know about leading an empire? He smiled, while biting into a chunk of meat. And you do give audience to members of the kingdom. Have they seemed dissatisfied? Your place is within the castle, where you are safest. He swallowed the mouthful while the emperor laid his head down to sleep. You are doing a wonderful job, Your Majesty. Have I ever lied to you before? He said before shutting the door, leaving Emperor Makoto alone. You haven't, Prime Minister, he said, closing his eyes to sleep. But what reason would a god have to lie to me? He thought before going into the land of dreams. With Prime Minister Honest. Damn that blasted Ichigo, Kurosaki Honest thought, scowling at the thought of the Soul Reaper that appeared out of nowhere. Where does he get off, ruining my carefully laid plans? If that brat leaves the castle and decides to actually do anything, I can kiss this cushy life of mine goodbye. I can't exactly find a replacement puppet, not with the current state of the empire. He tore into the meat he had, now free of the need to control himself around his puppet. Well, it's no matter. He's sure to be dead by now. How many can possibly challenge the mighty Esdeath? He smiled before coming across an unconscious Budo being carried by two of Esdeath's three beasts, with the general herself looking furious. Esdeath, tell me you have good news, he demanded, growing concerned that the key to his power would be incapable of serving his needs. The Shinigami got away. I underestimated him, she bluntly replied, wincing as she felt her bruised stomach from when Ichigo punched her. I wanted to avoid killing him so much, I held back and he escaped me. She smiled as a blush colored her cheeks before whispering to herself. He is amazing. Not just Budo, but you were unable to best him, Honest asked, already trying to think of how to deal with the Shinigami. Brute force did nothing so far, and now he disappeared. Before anything else can be done, he needed Ichigo found. I'll begin to have wanted posters made immediately, and will... That is a terrible idea, the general immediately said, interrupting the man. It's just been established that he can match me in combat and that he will defend himself. If you turn this into a manhunt, you will waste resources that will result in nothing but failures to bring him in. She then took on a predatory grin. Besides, our deal was that so long as I have my fun, I will side with you. This is my hunt, so do not interfere. She left the threat hanging in the air, daring the Prime Minister to make a foolish decision. Very well, General, Honest said, knowing a losing battle when he saw it. Besides, there was sense in Esdeath's claim. He just needed to use it. Where was he going before you lost sight of him? He was heading northward before vanishing before my eyes. That's my only clue, she said, thinking back on similar difficult hunts from her youth. That's a fortunate coincidence, the glutton said, pleasantly surprised. The northern territories have been getting unruly as of late. I was thinking of sending you there to wipe them out. Maybe killing off the entire nation will summon him to you? Esdeath thought it over. Baiting a god for a rematch sounded tempting. I might just do that, she smiled coldly. Unknown location. Hidden away, behind a thick forest and mountain stone far from the rest of civilization, was a building. A featureless fortress that seemed carved directly into a stone cliff. Definitely a building that looks like it's balancing the top of the natural rock on top of it. Inside this mountain base was a collection of individuals, soldiers, a merchant, carefree folks, all that felt a dissatisfaction with the current state of the empire and serve a niche critical to any war. Assassination. This was the base of Night Raid, the assassination corps of the Revolutionary Army. They target those that are crucial in the empire's corrupt regime and strike them down, weakening the state for when the war reaches the capital. They also gather intelligence and retrieve any of the weapons called Tegu to strengthen their rebel forces. As such, 2 members of this group were investigating an unknown that recently crashed into the palace and fought against the 2 leading generals of the empire, and the appearance of weird danger beasts that appeared and disappeared almost instantly. They found Ichigo Kurosaki and brought him back to their base, offering him a safe place to rest himself, where he took a bed and encased himself in a pyramid of glowing light before falling asleep. "That's quite a story, you two," a silver-haired woman with a robotic arm said, looking at the teen within the barrier. "I personally know how dangerous Esdeath is, and you're saying that kid managed to hold her off on his own." "We only saw the aftermath, boss," the blonde girl said. "This big cube thing shattered with him punching her. Then he landed on the parapet of the wall before she ran after something. It seemed like she was chasing an illusion, so he likely has a Tegu of his own," the black-haired one said. "He could be a key asset." The leader of the group took a drag of her cigarette, mulling over the idea before coming to a conclusion. "Keep an eye on him, and let me know when he wakes up," she said before leaving the room. "Someone that can fight her. Just one person capable of that level of strength is terrifying enough. Now there's another?" She needed to play her cards right, for the sake of the nation that is the Empire. This person was Negenda, leader of the assassination unit called Night Raid and former general of the Empire. And this teen may just be the godsend she was hoping for against Esdeath. The hours passed as Ichigo continued to rest, his body finally reaching stability with the rise of the world, while Night Raid members kept watch over him in shifts. As the spiritual power imbalance righted itself, the already abnormal appearances of strange danger beasts began to fade as well, leaving only a few individuals catching any glimpse of one of the masked monsters. Soon, the morning sun bled over the horizon as the new day dawned. The light reached the Soul Reaper and roused him from his slumber as the rays danced on his eyes. Ugh. Whether in this world or back home, mornings always suck, he thought as he stretched his body, the increased blood flow helping to further awaken him. He sat up and snapped his fingers, dispelling the barrier that kept him safe. No headache, no disorientation. I still feel a bit stiff, but not as bad as last night, he analyzed himself, not noticing the other occupant in the room. "Well, you're a handsome one." Ichigo finally looked to the side, seeing a tall and buff man with a thick black pompadour in the shape of a heart, wearing a black skin-tight shirt with green chest and shoulder armor. "Name's Bulat. Nice to meet ya," he said with a smile, and a wink that made the Soul Reaper a little suspicious about the man's preferences. "Hate to ruin your morning, but the boss wanted to meet you as soon as you wake up." "I guess that's fair," Ichigo said as he got out of bed and continued to stretch. "I did sleep in your house after all." After a few more stretches and bones popping, he was ready for a talk and hopefully breakfast. "All right, let's do this," he said as Bulat escorted him from the sleeping quarters to the meeting room of the base. Inside was 6 more people, a purple-haired woman with glasses, a lilac chenegasm, and a scar on her right cheek, a green-haired teen with red goggles and a green hoodie, a pink-haired girl with twin tails and a pink dress that seemed to be looking down on him, the 2 he met that brought him here, and a woman with a robotic arm that seemed to be the leader. "Welcome, whoever you are, glad to see you're awake," she said, popping in a cigarette and lighting it. "It's not often one fights Esdeath and lives, let alone one that manages to walk away." "Who are you, stranger?" Ichigo took a moment to observe his surroundings, finding that he was soon surrounded by the group. They weren't showing obvious aggression, but he was familiar with assassins and recognized their readiness to pounce. Not nearly on Mitsukido levels, but not half bad. "I'm Ichigo Kurosaki, Soul Reaper," he answered, getting surprised looks from the group, with the boss lady and the black-haired girl still analyzing him. "Do I get to know my hosts, or doesn't that count for good manners to introduce yourselves first?" Some of the assassins shifted about at that, but the boss took a drag and exhaled before answering. "I'm Negenda, the leader of Night Raid." She used her cigarette to point at the other members of her group, starting with the blonde from last night. "My team members are Leone, the black-haired girl, Akam, you've met Bulat, the pink girl, mine, the goggles guy, Lubbock, ending on the purple-haired girl, and Shiel. How much do you know about what's going on?" "I'm more interested in what a Soul Reaper is," Lubbock interrupted. "Are you really the guy that ferries the souls of the dead to the afterlife?" "Not as intimidating as I expected," Mine interjected. "What a letdown." Negenda sent a glare to the two, shutting them up rather quickly. Well, I already know that the Empire is in a state of civil war, Ichigo answered, going by what he was told and what he figured out for himself. I know that the Prime Minister is likely the main culprit and the Emperor is nothing but a puppet to him. Negenda nodded, showing him that everything he just said was pretty much the truth. I'm guessing Night Raid is a faction of the Revolutionary Army. Assassination, reconnaissance, any dirty job that needs doing to weaken the Empire, Negenda responded. And I suspect you know what I'm about to ask of you. Whether or not I'll join or how I manage to fight Esdeath, he said, gambling on the possibility of enacting his plan to escape if necessary. When Negenda nodded, Ichigo put his plan into motion. Well, in reverse order, I fought Esdeath using this. He unsheathed his Kaido blade. Only Akame heard him whisper shatter. Kyoka Suwaijutsu. The blade pulsed in response. My blade, my Zanpakuto, was the key for that fight. It allowed me to create the illusion that let her run off after I said the fight was over. And that other sword on your hip, Akame started. Is that also a Zanpakuto? It is, but that sword is strictly for fighting. He turned his attention back to Negenda. Every Shinigami has a Zanpakuto and every Zanpakuto is unique. Some are simple weapon changes while others rival and exceed the most powerful Tegu, at least from what I've seen from Esdeath and Budo. Ichigo thought back to some of the other Zanpakuto he's seen from his allies in the Gotai. I'm familiar with ice manipulation, and the man that trained me controlled fire. He's said to have the strongest offensive might of any Soul Reaper. So there are other Shinigami, Negenda asked, processing the new information while the others questioned how believable the story was. Yes, but I am the only one in the Empire. The hybrid answered before getting to the next point. And no, I will not join you, he said, making the other members either angry, sad, or disappointed by the rejection. This is your war, I will not fight it. Well, we can't let you go freely, Lubbock stated. Not when you've seen our base. Oh really? Ichigo said, suddenly behind Lubbock as he released his hypnosis on the group. His hand was around Lubbock's throat and held a blade under Negenda's. Akame's blade. Would you like to tell me how you plan to stop me? Before anyone could react, Negenda shouted. Nobody move. All the assassins froze in place, the general keeping them under control. I apologize for my subordinate's rudeness. I assume the Emperor also asked you to join him and you said no, she asked, remaining calm despite the instant kill blade under her neck. What do you plan to do? My orders are to reap souls and not involve myself in your war, Ichigo answered. That's my only commitment here. And why are you flesh and blood instead of spirit? She asked, finding it odd that a spiritual being would be here in the flesh. Technically, I'm both. I'm still driven by the need of sleep and hunger, but I can't eat human food as a spirit. So you'll need a place to live, Ichigo nodded, making Negenda smile. Then you can live here, she said, surprising everyone. I won't ask you to fight our battles or join in our assassinations, but you will have to defend the place if attacked. Sound fair? She asked, making Ichigo mull over the idea. The others remained silent, figuring that she had a good reason for this. I have one condition, he returned. Are you planning to kill the Emperor as well? He may just be a puppet, but the people may not be satisfied with just Honest's death. You're not killing the kid. He's just as much a victim. Ichigo returned, releasing Lubbock before walking over to Akame and handing back her sword. Ichigo, that's not up to, she started before a crushing pressure brought them all to their knees. The kid lives, that's final. Ichigo repeated as proceeded to walk out of the base. Time skip, back in the capital. Days and weeks passed as Ichigo acclimated to his new life. Within a week, he carved out a training basement under Night Raid's headquarters to serve as his base. The following week was spent trying to understand Kisuke's gift, a portable lab that seemed like a simple briefcase. Ichigo had access to virtually anything he would need to research and experiment with: engineering, chemistry, biology. Kisuke even managed to create a 3D printer that relied on Raizhi. Everything in that kit was powered by Raizhi, something that Ichigo had in great abundance as he powered it up and made the first thing that came to mind in the Shinigami Tools section. A soul visualization device, which resulted in a brown slug-like thing with purple spots and a mummified head with an eye in the mouth. He tested its effectiveness with Akame and Mine when revealing a hollow he captured for the test. Mine screamed while Akame asked how it would taste, getting disappointed when told she couldn't eat it. The rest of the month and the next Ichigo spent studying the history of the empire, the Tegu, lore books, the various danger beasts in the world, and sending the occasional spirit to the hereafter. Hollows have been steering clear of the capital, likely ever since Ichigo first appeared there, and only rarely show up. Ichigo had been disgusted by the amount of death that was in the capital. Budo was facing a lot of ridicule for his loss. That fat prime minister was sticking close to the child emperor at all times, and Esdeath was currently gone. The only upside was that Budo was training himself to make up for his loss. The capital was waning on Ichigo's patience, always arriving to souls crying out about the injustices they suffered, the cruelty of their deaths, and the hate they all felt at their fates. It broke his heart. He wanted to strike down everyone that was doing the killing, but that would be a slippery slope. Yamamoto warned him against taking justice into his own hands, knowing that doing so was an easy path into becoming a tyrant. How can I help these people? He asked himself, begging for some kind of answer. Do some good while staying within the rules that were set out for him. He sensed an angry soul coming from within the noble district in the capital and went toward it, finding a girl with long black hair and black eyes. Her skin was a pale yellow, and she was wrapped in chains that wrapped around the shed on the mansion's property. A bound spirit, he noted as he got closer to her. You vile bitch, I swear you'll get yours one day. Don't you dare hurt Tatsumi? She yelled out in anger at being unable to make her voice heard and sorrow that someone else she cared about was about to meet the same terrible fate she did. Tatsumi, run. I'm sorry to say, but he can't hear you. No matter how loudly you scream. Ichigo said, making her turn to face the Soul Reaper. Her face had tear stains and the hole on her chest was close to opening. Is he a friend of yours? He asked while examining the house. Didn't Leon talk about a mission earlier? He thought while remembering a discussion about a wealthy family masquerading as a charitable family, only to torture people to death. He is. The girl admitted. We were supposed to come to the capital, find employment, help our village, but we got separated during a bandit attack along the way. Myself, Tatsumi, and our other friend Iyasu. Iyasu and I got tricked by those monsters. They tortured me until I died while drugging Iyasu. She started crying again, pointing to the shed. He's still alive in there, suffering, and now they have Tatsumi, she said before collapsing to her knees. Ichigo didn't know what to say, until he felt 6 very familiar presences appear. Well, looks like your friend is saved, Ichigo said, looking up as Night Raid appeared. Just sit back and watch. The assassins got to work, clearing out the building, making Tatsumi and a blonde girl named Aria, both named by the bound spirit, run out to escape the attack. Tatsumi was a young teen with brown, spiky hair, green eyes, and a penchant for short swords, and Aria was apparently the one that tortured the spirit to her death. They continued to watch as Tatsumi faced off against Akame, was stopped by Leon, and shown the truth. Seo? Hey Seo. Seo? Tatsumi called out desperately, begging her to answer. Ichigo tuned them out, recognizing only 1/10 of the victims inside as people he managed to get to. The rest probably became hollows or were eaten. How many more victims were out there? How many more murderers? In that moment, Ichigo knew that he needed to step up his efforts. Only he can help the dead. Seo, Seo, is that you? He heard someone say as a boy with spiky black hair, brown eyes, and a martial arts headband appeared. A chain on his chest showing that he was a soul. Iyasu, Seo called out, hugging her friend. That sight brought Ichigo some comfort. Then he saw Aria meet up with who he guessed were her parents. Hey, stay here, Ichigo ordered before flashing in front of the reunited family. Time to go to hell, he said coldly, taking one of his Zanpakuto and tapping the pommel against their foreheads in rapid succession before they could even react. The judgment of the blade made itself clear as they grasped their heads in pain, where the marks glowed a fiery red. Suddenly fire erupted from their skulls until a massive set of doors appeared, held shut by 2 giant skeletons. The doors opened, fire pouring forth as chains sprang out and attached themselves to the family. They all screamed helplessly as they were dragged away into the realm of eternal torment. With that done, Ichigo flashed back to the 2 friends. Any last requests before I send you 2 off? He asked, making them look to the Reaper in fear. Don't worry, you two aren't going to hell. Unless you were really awful people, but I doubt that you were," he said, calming their nerves. "Well, if you can," Seo started. "Could you help us say goodbye to Tatsumi?" she asked, Ieyasu nodding in agreement. Ichigo looked to the storehouse full of corpses and the chain that kept Seo bound to it. Hado #54. Heian, Ichigo called out before throwing a purple orb of energy to the storehouse, causing it to erupt into flames that burned it away in seconds. To ensure Seo's freedom, Ichigo swung his blade and cut the chains that attached her to the storehouse. "Hang on, you two," Ichigo ordered. Taking hold of both of them and flashing back to the night raid base, he made the trip within seconds, beating the assassins by a large margin, and stood them outside the base. "Wait here," he said before dropping down to his training basement and recovering the soul visualization slug. "What is that?" Seo demanded, freaked out by the creepy contraption. "And I thought that storehouse was freaky," Ieyasu muttered. "This is what will let you say your goodbyes," Ichigo answered, seeing night raids return. He took the ring that would let him exist in the living world and slipped it on, appearing out of nowhere to the assassins. "Tatsumi," he called out, gaining the kid's attention. "Here." He activated the projector, revealing the two souls to their friend. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Hollow Concerns. "Hey Ichigo," Leon called out to the hybrid while he was reading the book on every known tegu that night raid had. "Hollows are a huge danger, right? How can we stop them from attacking civilians when you're not around?" "Don't worry about it," Ichigo responded offhandedly. "Humans aren't normally worth eating anyway. I know none of you are." Leon wasn't sure whether to be confused or offended. Why Ichigo isn't going to train Tatsumi. "Hey, Mr. Ichigo." Ichigo looked up from his journal that he started writing to record possible recruits for the Blood War, and to keep track of any and all possible threats in the world. Tatsumi was running to him with a blunt practice sword. "I heard you're incredibly powerful. Could you perhaps train me?" Ichigo merely stared at the boy, closing his journal and standing up. "Stop this," Ichigo ordered, tossing his journal into the air. The very next instant, Tatsumi was on the ground. "Were you even able to follow that?" he asked, Tatsumi unable to say anything and still trying to grasp what just happened. "You're way too weak to be training with me, kid." The book fell back into Ichigo's hand. "Come back when you're leagues stronger than you are now." Changing capital. With Night Raid and Ichigo. "Seo? Ieyasu?" Tatsumi stared at his two friends in shock, swearing that he just saw their dead bodies, and the orange-haired man dressed in black that called to him. He ran out to the two, passing through as he attempted to hug his lost friends. "What? But you can see them, but you can't touch them," Ichigo explained, the boy looking at the Soul Reaper while on the verge of tears. "This is so you can give them a proper goodbye." The two souls looked to Tatsumi with sad smiles. "Sorry Tatsumi, that's all we can do," Seo told him. "It's up to you now," Ieyasu said, putting on a confident smile. "Sorry to leave our goals to you alone, but if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Seo turned to the members of Night Raid. "You wanted to recruit him, right?" she asked, Leon stepping up to the ghost. "Yeah, he's got what it takes," she said, thinking back to how Tatsumi handled himself earlier that night. "He's going to need some training, but he's got potential." "You'd better take care of him," Seo warned. "Or I'll haunt you guys." Ichigo coughed loudly, letting them know that it was time to pass on. "Who are you?" Tatsumi asked, finally remembering the Shinigami after seeing his friends. "Ichigo Kurosaki, the Empire's resident death god," Bulat said, his voice filtered through the armor. Tatsumi practically lit up at the news. "A god? Then maybe," he started, only for Ichigo to shoot it down. "They've died, Tatsumi," he sternly said, taking out his Zanpakuto and tapping Seo and Ieyasu on the head with the pommel. "Once you've died, you do not come back to life. Not like how you're thinking." The pair said goodbye one last time as they glowed a bright white before flying away as black butterflies. "You don't get second chances." "But you're a god," Tatsumi weakly argued. "I may be Shinigami, but the official title and duty is Soul Reaper," Ichigo explained. "I help the dead pass on. And I may be pushing the limits of what I can and can't do already. You should make your peace." he said, Tatsumi dropping to his knees as that last bit of hope of seeing his friends alive truly disappeared. He began crying, clinging to Shiel as she embraced him in a gentle hug, mourning the loss of his friends and the cruel reality that the death god made clear. Timeskip, the capital. It's been 3 days since Tatsumi was brought in by Night Raid, 2 for him to recover from his loss, and the last he spent talking to the members of the assassination group. He also badgered Ichigo about the afterlife and asking questions that Ichigo just did not have the answers to, especially since he knew nothing about the Dimension's religion. The kid made a point to camp out in Ichigo's personal room beneath the base to talk to the Soul Reaper. Ichigo eventually learned to find comfortable roofs to sleep on, expecting to spend days in the capital just to escape the kid. More than that, he spent his time helping every soul he could find to help pass on. It never ends. Ichigo sighed, performing hundreds of kanso on so many dead. Dead with anger and hate for the corrupt and sadistic of the empire. Even the small percent he could help find closure paled in comparison to the numbers he forced to pass on, the ones that demanded vengeance or justice. On the hollow side, dozens kept appearing from souls he couldn't reach before the transformation, and ended up slaying without mercy. At times, he wondered if he should forego any sense of niceties and just kanso every soul as fast as he could. Before Ichigo realized it, he was walking on the palace grounds. "Been a while since I was here," he said to himself as guards walked around. No one noticed the Shinigami. He was in his spirit form and thus invisible to those without sufficient spirit energy. Might as well see what's going on here. Maybe this might help take my mind off things. Willing to bet that fat ass is still hovering over the kid, he said as he phased through the walls. Much to his disappointment, he was right. Honest was still hovering over Makoto's side, smiling as the kid sentenced a man to imprisonment and congratulating him. But for the briefest instant, he thought he saw some small measure of doubt in the kid's eyes. Nothing is going to change unless that kid gets some independence, Ichigo thought as the Prime Minister guided him out of the room, discussing lunch plans. Ichigo's hand twitched, imagining just how easy it would be for him to kill that fat bastard, but he forcibly stayed his hand. That was not his decision to make. Who lives and who dies, not even where he sent people, was entirely his choice. He released a sigh of frustration before sending out a Pesquisa pulse. He sensed the Tegu in the vault and on their users, an incredible presence under the palace, a man with thunder in his soul on the training field, and found out how strong Honest was. That last one surprised him. While surprising, I doubt it's anything to worry about, he thought as he began walking to the training field. I should probably warn those Night Raid guys about him. I may not be fighting for them, but that doesn't mean I can't offer any advice. Now, why can't I sense Esdev? He wondered as he reached the training field, where he found Budo sparring with what he assumed to be members of the Royal Guard. I said, "Come at me with the intent to kill me," he roared as he sent a man flying with a punch, tossing around his sparring partners with some small effort. Ichigo reached out and manifested spirit ribbons, grabbing onto Budo's and putting the general on alert. "That's enough for today. All of you get some rest," he ordered, something many of the guards were relieved to hear as they left. Soon, the only people were Budo and Ichigo. "Are you there, Soul Reaper?" he asked as Ichigo put on his Gigi ring, as he took to calling it. "I see you taking some of my advice to heart," Ichigo said as he manifested into a physical form. Budo didn't say anything, but looked to a window above Ichigo and giving a silent warning. The hybrid nodded and disappeared again, only to reappear where Budo indicated and found a soldier looking confused. Ichigo brought out a memory modifier and clicked it in front of the man, who passed out and began talking about Budo seeing his wife. "It'll do," he thought before flashing back down to Budo. "Honest has his agents spying on me after you bested me," the general informed the Soul Reaper. "He has his paid drones watching me while he hovers over the Emperor like a damned hawk. I would be doing something, but I've been unable to do anything. The only time he leaves the Emperor's side is when the Emperor is too occupied with something other than state affairs, like when he's bathing or sleeping or just being a child." Budo growled, frustrated with his lack of ability to do anything with the current situation. "How severe is the watch?" Ichigo asked, scanning the area around them for any more possible spies. "Is it just one at a time or completely random?" Budo shook his head. "I'm under constant watch," he answered. "Now was just one of the few lucky times I only had one person watching me." He looked the Soul Reaper in the eye. I know I probably shouldn't ask this of you, but Honest is looking for any reason to have me dismissed and executed. If you can you take the Emperor and show him the state of the Empire? Ichigo thought for a moment, debating whether or not he could or if that was in violation of his duties. One idea did pop into his head though, he just needed to make the right tool for the job. I'll consider it, he said as he got ready to leave, before realizing something was off. By the way, I can't sense Esdeath. What's going on with her? You can sense people? Budo asked, surprised for a second before scoffing. Of course you can. She was dispatched to subjugate the northern tribes. She hopes to find you there since she last saw you heading north. She'll be disappointed then. I never left the capital, Ichigo informed him. There's so much death here already, I'd need a whole squad to cover all the souls here. Besides, I'm not getting involved in the war. Then can you stop a massacre? Budo suddenly asked, surprising Ichigo. Esdeath loves battle, lives to fight. Nothing brings her more joy than the suffering of her enemies. After crushing an army, she'll let her soldiers pillage and rape to their heart's content while she makes any survivors watch, just on the chance that they'll grow stronger and challenge her again. Ichigo was shocked. Even Anohana at her worst wasn't this bloodthirsty in her days as the first Kenpachi. She was going to need more than Ichigo's Kenpachi treatment. She needed to be humbled. The question of could and should didn't come to the Soul Reaper's mind. He was going to stop her from attacking civilians. We'll have to find out. See you in a few days, Ichigo said as he removed his ring and traveled back to the Night Raid base. Night Raid perimeter. Here we go, hopefully Tatsumi will lay off and… Ichigo said, flashing back to the forest around Night Raid's base and feeling more presences in the area. Let's see. Shiel, Akame, Mine, Bulat, Lubbock, Leon, Tatsumi, Negenda's back, and another 8 people in the forest. I'm fairly certain they weren't invited to join Night Raid. He stretched his body, bones popping all over, as he got ready. Time to earn my keep, he said before disappearing in a flash. The first stop was by the river, finding 3 of the people. They were dark-skinned and seemed to dress similar to African tribesmen back on Earth. All were on guard like they knew they were in enemy territory. Ichigo was standing high above, on solid Rize, out of their range of awareness. Soon the group began to look around, as if they were seeing things, but collapsing onto the ground. Hakufuku, you are such a useful spell, the hybrid said before tossing down a single tendril of orange and yellow energy from a Horan spell, tying up the scouts and hoisting them up to his level. Now let's move on to the next. He flashed to a new location, deeper into the forest, with another scout running directly into him. He fell as Ichigo forced himself to stay upright, immediately throwing the Horan Tide group into the scout and making him join the bundle. That's 4. Ichigo counted off, while another scout appeared behind him with the intent to cut his head off. Make that 5, he said, instantly grabbing the scout's ankle and throwing him into the bundle. Who are you? One of the bigger guys demanded, before Ichigo held a hand up and his mind went blank. Best hurry, the hybrid said, sensing that Night Raid just found out that they were being invaded. He grabbed the bundle and flashed to a new location, a clearing in the forest with another scout looking to be on the retreat. Tossing aside subtlety, Ichigo threw the Kaido bundle into the scout and tying him into it as well. 2 more, he said, looking to his right and finding a woman about to enter a cave. This is going to be rough. Ichigo summoned up his bow, took aim, and fired. The spirit bolt pierced through trees, rocks, and shot her leg off at the knee. Sorry about that, he muttered, trying to avoid killing. He agreed to protect the hideout, but he never said he'd kill for them. He knew he'd reap the souls anyway, but he wanted to avoid killing them himself. Killing was not something he wanted to make a habit out of. That didn't stop his reflexes from striking as hard as he could when he felt someone pop up from behind him, courtesy of Yamamoto's new training regime of having Zaraki attack the hybrid at any time. A sickening crack rang out as Ichigo's fist hit the guy's head, twisting it to an unsightly angle and killing the man instantly. Ichigo sighed in disappointment. Not the first time he's killed intentionally or accidentally, and it likely won't be the last with the vast difference in strength and power between him and everyone else. Well, guess I made the right call making that deal with you, Negenda said, entering the clearing with most of Night Raid, lit cigarette in hand. Lubbock was apparently taking care of that woman Ichigo shot. Lubbock thought his wire signal was going haywire for a bit, she said with a slight chuckle. Without any prompting, Shiel walked up to the scouts tied up in the Horenkaido and cleaved them all in half with her massive pair of scissors. And they were mostly alive. Mine said in a haughty, arrogant tone. What kind of guard dog are? Ichigo glared at her, looking her dead in the eyes, and she stopped breathing as an invisible weight came crashing down on her. The deal is that I protect the base, not that I kill for you. Ichigo reminded, letting up on his Ryatsu and leaving Mine gasping for air. Do not mistake the bargain we have. He turned away from the irritating sniper and turned back to Negenda. Budo is under heavy watch from the Prime Minister, so if Makoto is going to see the state of the Empire, then I'm going to need a certain tool to help get him out of the palace and without honest interfering. Can you make this tool? The assassin boss asked, getting a nod from the Shinigami. You'll be wanting our assistance in testing it out when you're done, another nod. How long do you think that'll take? Depends on how long it'll take me to get back, Ichigo answered. Budo also informed me that Esdeath is in the north, looking for me, and about how she treats her victims. Most of the members of Night Raid cringed at that, knowing the stories of Esdeath's legendary sadism. I'll be stopping that from happening, the Soul Reaper informed, performing his konso on the scouts' souls as soon as they realized they were dead. Are you sure you can do that? Negenda asked, remembering the rules Ichigo set out for them. Doesn't this mean that you're picking a side? That you're getting involved? Maybe. For now, I see it as picking my side, which implores me to protect the civilians. He returned. Besides, I doubt your trip to your superiors didn't mention me in the slightest. Did it? Negenda took a drag from her cigarette. They insist I try to either convince you to join us or find a way to kill you, she answered, earning surprise from each of the assassins as they gauged their chances. You're right about your spot on the board, Ichigo. You're either an invaluable asset or a threat that needs to be eliminated. This is an order I'll be ignoring since none of us are exactly suicidal. Good girl, Ichigo returned, getting ready to remove his Gigi ring. Don't get into too much trouble while I'm away. With the ring off, and his power unrestrained, the hybrid flew northward to find and fight the Icy General, capital city of the northern tribes. It was pathetically easy, at least for someone like her. Over the course of 2 months, she and her army made their way to the northern territory. She felt some mild nostalgia as the biting cold hit her, but she only had one goal in her mission to the north. Find and bring out the Soul Reaper Ichigo Kurosaki, her new obsession. When she and her army reached the fortified capital city, she showed no mercy. She destroyed the walls, froze everyone she came across, killed thousands, and very quickly crushed the hero of the North Numa Seika. But the death god did not appear. Where is he? She thought in anger, not even bothering with her hobby of torturing the beaten prince. Did he not feel all the death here? What does it take to call him to me? Her mind raced for answers. Maybe more should do it, she muttered out loud before grinning. Liver, Dedara, Niao, gather the rest of the northerners and put them inside a pit. Let's bury them alive, she ordered of an older man with long gray hair and a mustache, a man without pupils and long spiky blonde hair with horns and a beard, and a smaller boyish man with blonde hair and cat-like eyes and fangs. Yes, Lady Esdeath, the three answered as they scrambled to obey. Next to the general was the bare and beaten Numa Seika, whose eyes shone a broken man. The general looked at the lean and dark-haired man, someone that was promised as a challenge for his title, but after fighting the Soul Reaper she wasn't even interested enough to be disappointed by the gap in their abilities. Now there he was, hanging on a cross with a collar on a chain leash, arms broken, and killed in spirit. She could have molded him to become a dog to lick her boots clean, but that held no appeal. All she wanted was the Soul Reaper, and hopefully all 400,000 of the remaining northerners dying might get his attention. Half an hour later, she was ready to make her sacrifice. This is your punishment for defying the Empire, she announced to the fearful and huddled masses. For daring to match our might, our power, when you are just so pathetically weak. But fear not, for your lives may hold some use to summon forth my beloved, my god of death, she said with a mad gleam in her eyes, such that even her own army was beginning to think she lost it. Ichigo Kurosaki, come forth and either reap their souls or try to stop me. she called out as a giant ball of ice formed above the heads of the northerners, who were now either panicking, praying, or calmly accepting their fates as the ice descended upon them. Then the ball was engulfed in a beam of red screeching light and was disintegrated, shocking everyone into a stunned silence while Esdeath smiled with glee. You finally decided to appear. She looked ahead to find her target on the other side of the pit. My love. To be honest, I didn't even leave the capital's region, Ichigo said, walking on air as he made his way to the general. I likely wouldn't have come if I didn't hear that you were in the north, looking for me. The general gave a hand gesture, making her whole army step back and away from the unknown figure. No one noticed Numaseka getting some light in his eyes as hope returned. Now, you want to tell me what's going on here, Esdeath? I wanted to see you again, she answered, smiling brightly as she blushed. Seeing the man she decided to fall for bringing out the woman in her. I figured the best way to summon a death god is to be around death on a grand scale. This was the second try. She continued to smile, despite Ichigo's glare. What makes you think this pleases me? He asked, a slight pressure in the area appearing and growing little by little. I didn't think it would, I just wanted to see you again, she answered, unaffected but noticing the pressure. But why should you care anyway? You said it yourself that you weren't going to fight on behalf of the Empire or its enemies. You weren't going to involve yourself in a war. There's a difference between a war and a massacre, Esdeath, Ichigo returned. A war, no matter how one-sided, implies that there was fighting between the two. A massacre is the slaughter of those that can't fight or defend themselves. He grabbed onto one of his blades. And I'm not going to let you do as you please, Zangetsu, he called out, now holding a trench and kyber knife pair of blades and swinging them out to create a large noticeable gash in the ground. This is the line. You will not cross it. The ice general licked her lips as she unsheathed her blade. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Magender reports about Ichigo. And I believe Leon's report that he can and has fought on par with Esdeath, because, when threatened, he disarmed Akame and had me and Lubbock at his mercy within an instant. The boss of Night Raid reported to her higher-ups. The good news is that he claims to be neutral in this war, so we probably don't have to worry about fighting him. That said, he also won't be allying with us. This is most concerning. One of the leaders of the revolution said, cloaked in shadow because the author is too lazy to find an actual image of one of the leaders. But do you really believe he is a god? I believe he is godlike, but he insists on Soul Reaper, she responded. That, and he's shown to inhabit both the physical and spiritual planes. Either way, this can't be ignored. We'll look for anyone that is capable of joining Night Raid to strengthen your side. In the meantime, you find out anything you can about him. Prioritize vulnerabilities to kill him if necessary. Convince him to join if you can. Understood, Najenda answered, smiling at the promise of new assassins to aid. Not that they'd do much against the Soul Reaper, but they didn't need to know that. Mine needs to learn. Is there something you want mine? Ichigo asked. The sniper in question was glaring at the Shinigami as he drank tea and read another book on the history of the Empire. How are you, Death? She demanded. No matter how I look at you, you're just an average teen boy. Aren't you supposed to be skeletal, grim-looking, actually scary? I doubt you could scare. She shut up as Ichigo looked at her with pitch-black eyes with piercing gold pupils, and every primal instinct in her body screamed at her to run. Then he blinked and his eyes returned to their normal brown. Scary enough for you? Mine said nothing as she went to change her underwear. Death's intervention. Ichigo versus Esdeath. Before we do this, answer me this, Esdeath, Ichigo demanded, holding the black blades of Zangetsu at the ready. Your mission was to subdue the northern tribes, was it not? The general nodded, readying herself for the coming fight at the slightest provocation. Their army has been crushed, is that not enough? Why continue to kill and slaughter? And don't say it was to summon me. I heard from Budo that you have a habit of torturing your victims, like a cat with her prey. Esdeath looked the Soul Reaper in the eye and told him why. The strong live, the weak die, she said, stating what she felt was the most natural fact. Is that not the way of the world? Survival of the fittest? The weak will always be subjugated by the strong. She pointed with her chin to beaten Numaseka and the group of civilians still trapped in the pit. They were weak and have no one to blame but themselves for their loss. By that reasoning, you'd have no right to complain if I defeated you. Ichigo returned, the prince keeping his eyes on the Soul Reaper. Not that I'd lose to someone so weak. Esdeath glared at him, demanding an explanation. All I've ever heard is that you've destroyed, and I'm not impressed. The true measure of strength and power is not in what one destroys. Any single person can do that, but by what they can protect and preserve, because that is something only few can do. The duty of the strong is to protect and guide the weak so that they may become strong. That's why people become leaders and warriors. Is that what you, a death god, believes? She said, unable to imagine such a thing as duty in protecting the weak. I'm supposed to believe that? Ichigo held his blades at the ready, waiting for the clash of ice and death. Then prove it to me, she called as she charged at him. Ichigo met her with a thunderous clash. The strike caused a shock wave and gust of air strong enough to quell the winter winds and snowfall. They stayed in that blade lock for a few seconds, Esdeath gaining an excited smirk for the rematch she was craving and Ichigo charging his Raizhi through his blades, making them glow with blackish red and whitish blue. You're going to regret asking me to do that, Ichigo promised before swinging his trench knife, cutting through her rapier before being pushed back by a sudden spike of ice she shot from her free hand. Ichigo grunted from the sudden stab, but never let up on the blunt and hyro that he learned to keep up at all times. The spear shattered, but she created dual blades of ice to make up for the loss of her sword before the two charged at each other again. He's matching the general with ease, one of the soldiers said in shock. He's on par with the strongest of the empire. No, not just that, another said. The general is on par with a god. You're right, the general believes he's a god, but she's matching him blow for blow. With every slash and every clash, Esdeath needed to use her power to restore her ice swords from their damage. Soon her army was chanting her name, cheering her on. Spurred on by her soldiers, she increased her speed and attack frequency before shooting an ice spire from beneath the two. She jumped away while the spire struck Ichigo's chin and uppercut him, sending the Soul Reaper skyward. The cheers of the soldiers rang out louder as he flew into the air, finding a storm of ice shards and boulders aimed right at him. You're mightier than the gods themselves, General, another cried out. Numa Seika stuck between hope and hopeless, while Ichigo prepared his counter. Ye Lord, mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. On the wall of blue flame, inscribe a twin lotus. In the abyss of conflagration, wait at the far heavens. Hado-73, Soren Saketsui. He said before firing a blast of fire so intense, it evaporated the ice and all the clouds. The soldiers were stunned silent. The northerners began praising their new god as he descended from the heavens. These cries fell on deaf ears as Esdeath grinned, firing shards of ice as rapidly as she could, only to have each one shot down. She barely recognized the glowing bow in Ichigo's hand that he used to deflect her ice shards until he touched down. Got you? Esdeath whispered as she activated her trap, freezing the ground beneath Ichigo and consuming his body instantly. I told this to the spirit of the ice danger beast whose blood I drank from my tegu. Now I say it to you, my beloved Shinigami. I am always the one to dominate, regardless of my enemy. She walked toward the ice-encased form of Ichigo Kurosaki, ignoring the cheers of her soldiers and the cries of her already broken enemy. God of death, Numa Seika cried out. Please, I beg you, anything you want. My eternal soul, the lives of my children, the praise of my entire nation, anything. Just please, save my people. He pleaded to the frozen statue, hoping that the prayer and sacrifice of his life and all else would be enough to empower the new god to defeat the invading army. His cries were met with a hard punch to his face. Shut up, one of the soldiers yelled out as he punched the prince. None are mightier than our general. The god of death himself fell before her. Now, time for a proper offering to a true goddess. He smiled savagely, cocking his gun as he and a few of his comrades marched to the edge of the pit holding the civilians. Esdeath reached the frozen case that was meant to hold the Soul Reaper. There was just one problem. The ice prison was empty. How? When did he? She thought in shock, thinking back to her fight with him, before realizing that her soldiers were right the first time. She wasn't keeping up with the Soul Reaper, he was keeping up with her. She probably hasn't even seen how fast he really is. She turned to order her troops to hold, but they already set a single foot across Ichigo's line. The instant it landed on the ground, Ichigo reappeared in front of the man. His kyber blade raised high, burning with black energy, and a white mask with vertical lines over the eyes on the Soul Reaper's face. "Getsuga Tensho," he called out before slamming his sword down directly on the man's head, cutting him in half. From Ichigo's blade was a wave of destruction that burned away anyone and anything caught in the blast. Esdeath and her army watched as over 1,000 of her troops were killed in an instant, the golden glare of Ichigo Kurosaki scanning over them in a manner familiar only to Esdeath. An apex predator picking out its prey. He was holding back. She realized, feeling a primal sense of fear she thought she had long forgotten come back at full force. Is this his real power? How strong is he? She wondered in fascination before looking to her troops again, stunned in fear. "Damn you, Ichigo," she cursed before making the one order she never thought she'd ever give in her military career. "Full retreat," fleeing from battle. "He's done being merciful. Retreat, all of you," she yelled out, finally getting her soldiers to turn and run. She stayed behind, unleashing her full ice power on the Shinigami. "Bakudo #81. Denku," Ichigo calmly stated as the ice shattered against the barrier, unable to reach the Soul Reaper. "I'm guessing you realize that I'm holding back," he said as she stopped the storm of ice shards, instead concentrating on creating a ball of ice so massive it would crush everything in the vicinity. "I still am, just so you know. Now let's see how you stand up to this." Suddenly a blast of energy shot from his chest toward the general, forcing her to use all the energy she gathered to make an ice wall. The Zero struck the ice, fracturing it, but it quickly faded as Ichigo got behind Esdeath and slammed her head against the ice. "If you're this powerful, why not kill me?" she demanded, immediately refocusing her energy to create an ice spear beneath the Soul Reaper. She needed to buy time, and she was less concerned with making the death god hers and was more concerned with keeping herself alive. "You can't say because you aren't involving yourself in this war. You're pretty involved if you killed so many of my men." Her challenge was rewarded by Ichigo slamming her head against the ice again. "Honestly, because I'm also scouting soldiers for my own war," he answered, unknowingly piquing the general's interest. "Enemies that have threatened existence itself, and are the ancient enemies of the Shinigami. A grudge of 1,000 years returning to destroy existence as we know it." Esdeath stopped gathering her energy for the spire and smiled excitedly, despite her position. "Are there many others that are strong like you?" she asked, her desire for battle and bloodshed forcing their way to the top. "They are definitely stronger than you, Esdeath," the Soul Reaper replied. "While I have a physical form, I am severely limited in my power." The Ice General felt her blood boil in anticipation, any promise to honest becoming meaningless if Ichigo could deliver that promise of such a war. "Are you planning on recruiting me?" she asked, Ichigo turning her to face him before wrapping a hand around her throat. "You would definitely make a good addition to our forces," the Soul Reaper admitted. "But unlike my teacher, I refuse to tolerate a bloodthirsty sadist that is just as willing to turn on me as she would fight for me." Ichigo's hand sparked with electricity. "So I'm going to have to break and mold you into a fitting Soul Reaper. Hado #11, Suzuri Raiden." Soon, Esdeath felt thousands of volts of electricity charge through her body and began to scream in agony, feeling the worst pain of her life. The cries rang out, far and wide, and Ichigo ascended into the air with her, flying to her army. He suddenly stopped the Kaido, leaving the sadist on the verge of passing out. "You've lost, and your brutal actions to civilians will no longer be tolerated," he said, before dropping her directly above her fleeing army. "Fleeing army? I can't believe it. Is this divine punishment, General?" were among the many confused and fearful cries as the soldiers left their leader behind to face the god of death. Only 3 kept their wits about them, staying focused enough to lead the army from disarray. The 3 beasts, Esdeath's direct underlings. Former General Liver kept the army organized as they fled, Deidara did what he could to keep morale up, and Niao played his hypnotic music to calm down the masses. "I can't believe anyone could be stronger than Lady Esdeath," Niao said, taking the recorder tegu from his lips and trying to come to terms that anything could match his master. "Was that really a god? A god came down to deliver punishment? Are we next?" He felt afraid for the first time in a long time, the thought of divine punishment terrifying the sadist. "Quiet Niao," Deidara growled, before he and the whole army cringed upon hearing a cry of agony. They all turned to the sky, seeing two people floating high above them. The Soul Reaper with their beloved general in his grasp, and she was screaming in pain. None of them could believe what they were hearing or seeing. That their mighty general, the strongest of the entire empire, was at the mercy of the figure in black. Her screams finally ended as she began to fall back to the earth. Lady Esdeath, Liver and many others cried out in concern as their mistress fell. "Quick, we have to catch her," Liver ordered as the army scrambled to save their leader. Liver took his tegu, a ring that controlled water, took all of their liquid provisions, and shot them to Esdeath with the intention of catching and slowing her descent. The rest of the military took one of the shirts of the giant among Esdeath's army and held it out to catch her. Their efforts bore fruit as Esdeath was cushioned by the water and caught in the jacket of the giant, but her body was twitching, her breathing was labored, and her heartbeat became irregular. "Medic!" Liver cried out as the doctor forced his way to the general. Several tense minutes and hours passed as the doctor worked and the army re-established their base. Whatever that Kurosaki fellow did, he meant to stop the general. The doctor finally announced to the key army members. There might be some trouble, since her heart was damaged from the fight, but she's likely to recover. Especially if we can get her to that stylish fellow. He might be able to repair her heart. The three beasts looked to each other as Liver took the lead. "We return to the capital," he announced. "We crushed the northern army, as were our orders. We haven't failed our mission." So the army began their march back to the capital, victorious over the northern tribes but bearing the weight of defeat for their general. With Ichigo. "Thank you, Shinigami," Numaseka said, now properly clothed and having his wounds dressed. "You have done what I was unable to do. Protect my people." Ichigo, with the application of Kaido and Raizhi manipulation, created a path to freedom for the northerners. "I pledged whatever you desired of me. Now." "Stop. I didn't do this to be praised or to get offerings," Ichigo interrupted, silencing the prince. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. That would it serve to aid my plans for Esdeath was a bonus. If you want to show me your gratitude, then take your people and lead them somewhere safe. I have little doubt that the Empire would be generous enough to leave you be, and I don't know if I'll be around to stop it next time." With that, Ichigo removed his Gigi ring and faced the hundreds that were still remaining after Ichigo defeated Esdeath. The majority passed on peacefully after he defeated the general, but many refused to move on from their attachments. "I've got plenty of work to do. If you are still around and don't know of it yet, might I suggest you look into the Crushing Mountain?" Numaseka offered. "No one has ever reached its summit because it seems to have this oppressive weight all around it that brings anything to their knees. Sometimes worse." With that, the northerners began to depart, searching for a new haven to call their home, leaving Ichigo to reap the dead and wonder what might be the source of the mountain's tale. Back to the capital. It took the Soul Reaper the entire day to console the hundreds of dead from the battle with Esdeath and her army, all of whom either cursed Ichigo for not killing Esdeath when he had the ability to do so or damning him for harming their beloved general. His compassion was spent, sending them all to the afterlife with little care for their final wishes if all they were going to do was rage at him for his choices. He didn't even put his ring back on, staying in spirit form as he wandered about the capital, trying to think. Esdeath would indeed be an impressive ally, but her sadistic personality and bloodthirsty nature makes her too much of a risk, he said, evaluating his first choice. "I doubt what I did was enough to change her, so I should do more work there. That said, she'd be a good fit for Zaraki's squad of Night Raids members." He stopped when he saw a soul with a scarred left eye, Imperial police armor, and 4 braided ponytails, raging about his death and clawing at his soul chain. "You think this is the end?" the man roared out. "You little bastard, even if it's beyond the grave, I will kill you. I own this damn city." He kept yelling before his chain ate itself and fell off, making him glow and explode. "I do not have the patience for this." Ichigo sighed while the man reformed as a hollow, an 8-foot-tall red figure with an Oni mask. The hollow, newly born and blindly mad, charged at the hybrid. The very instant the hollow got close, he froze, cut in twain instantly by the Soul Reaper. "I'm going to punish whoever made that guy go hollow," he said as the gates of hell opened for the hollow. "Not the first thing I wanted to get involved with when I got back." Ichigo continued to walk, going until his feet brought him to the palace yet again. Maybe if I do this I can improve Budo's situation, he thought as he walked into the palace and searched for the child emperor. He eventually found him, enjoying a rather modest meal, with Honest stuffing his face with a giant hunk of steak with a full 2-layer cake for dessert. "Don't you think you should cut back a bit on your dietary habits, Prime Minister?" the young Makoto asked, cutting into his steak. "The amount you eat daily cannot be healthy." Ichigo himself walked behind the emperor and got ready to move. "No need to worry about me, Your Majesty," Honest said with a smile before picking up the cake, blocking his view of the young monarch. "I take very good care of myself. I intend to live a long and happy." "I'm taking Makoto. Bye," he suddenly heard, prompting him to move the pastry. Unfortunately, the emperor was gone. Outside the palace, Makoto was dealing with vertigo from the very sudden movements that now put him floating in the air, but held safe in Ichigo's arms. "You all right, kid?" "Ichigo Kurosaki," the emperor shouted in shock. "What's going on here?" "I'm kidnapping you," the Soul Reaper said very bluntly. "Budo was supposed to show you the state of the capital, but that fat ass is breathing down his neck. Honest doesn't want you to see how the empire really is." "But why?" he asked. "What's wrong with me knowing the state of the kingdom?" "Because then you might think for yourself," Ichigo said, the young ruler looking to the death god as he began his little trip around the capital. With Esdef, the icy general rode on her steed, a mighty dragon-type danger beast, as her army marched back to the capital. A sense of defeat hung over them and morale was never lower for her troops, all linked to her. She was their unbeatable general, their unbroken pillar of strength, and she was crushed by one man. A man she openly declared was a god, so many took that as the heavens themselves deciding to punish her. But the worst of it was the news from her army doctor, a man she trusted and relied on with the lives of her troops, when he told her of the damage Ichigo did to her. Even if they lied, she could feel the damaged muscle in her chest as it ached every now and then. So besting him in combat isn't an option, that much is now evident, she thought as she began to strategize a plan B. He's made it clear that he has far more power than I thought, so I'll need to move with a different angle. He always says a number along with that Hado and Bakudo before casting what seems to be magic, meaning that he has many different kinds of whatever those attacks are. He's fast, meaning I'll have to get faster or somehow slow him down, and he's made it clear that if I want to let my army enjoy their spoils of war, he'll. She froze before smiling, thinking she found a way to make the Soul Reaper act on her terms, at least for a little while. But first things first, she needed to deal with her heart problem. Luckily, there was a doctor in the Empire's employ that likely had just the thing for her. With Makoto. The return to the palace was quiet. Makoto, having cried enough after seeing what little Ichigo had to show, was tired. The emperor saw the poor, the desperate, those that took advantage of others, a few instances of bribery, those that faced a slow public execution, all in the more densely populated areas of the capital city. He almost couldn't believe the Soul Reaper when he said that it was worse than what he already saw. Why did the Prime Minister keep all this from him, keep him sequestered in that palace? Because you might think for yourself. The words of the Shinigami rang in his mind as he remembered that line. Anytime he ordered an execution or imprisonment, someone was criticizing or slowing down something of the empire that Honest approved of. There were so many people starving, selling their bodies for food and drugs, and the Prime Minister was always eating something. Was Makoto even the actual leader, or was Ichigo right, and he was a figurehead? Ichigo brought him back to his room in the palace, easily getting into the royal bedchambers, with the thunderous sound of footsteps telling the pair that the royal guard were searching frantically. "What should I do?" Makoto asked, thinking it'd be best to let everyone know he's fine but stopping in front of the door. "I don't know who to trust anymore." "You do what Honest never wanted you to," Ichigo answered. "Think for yourself. You've got to make your own decisions, listen to your people, and choose what you think is right for your country. However, at the same time, you should probably play along with Honest. Let him think you're still his puppet but slowly drift from his control. I'd recommend having Budo near you. He's still loyal to the Empire and your safety is his top priority." Makoto looked to the Shinigami, who gave the child an encouraging smile. "I felt it in his fists," he said before disappearing, leaving Makoto alone. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." He pushed the door open, getting the guards' attention as they proceeded to ensure his good condition. "Take me to the great general, I have some questions for him." The guards complied as they escorted the boy to the throne room, where Honest and Budo were arguing. "The palace's defense is your responsibility. How did this happen?" Honest demanded, tearing into a huge chunk of meat. Budo was not intimidated, rather annoyed. "Someone decided to try to take command of my forces and waste time and resources to essentially watch and force me to always look over my shoulder," he countered. "Maybe if that someone would let me do my job, that person wouldn't have had the emperor taken while he was stuffing his fat face." "Enough," Makoto yelled out, thinking about what a strong ruler was like and imaging that on himself. "Budo, what's this about you being unable to perform your duties as head of the guard?" Budo stepped forward and knelt before the emperor. "Forgive me, my emperor," the lightning user started. "But it's been getting a little hard to focus on my duty when I'm under constant watch myself. I can't effectively command the guards because I don't know how many are waiting to stab me in the back," he said while giving a pointed glare to Honest, who was putting on his best face for the young lord. "You were brought to us, defeated by that Ichigo Kurosaki fellow," the prime minister argued. "This is the palace and the emperor himself. We can't afford to have a great general that's incapable of the task of keeping either safe." "Prime Minister, are you a general?" Makoto suddenly asked, surprising the two adults. "Did you get your position because you are a brilliant military soldier? I believe that Budo is and has been the head of the Imperial Guard and the much relied on great general from my father's time." Budo had to force down a smirk, knowing that a certain Soul Reaper had worked his magic. "Let the general do his job, while you focus on yours, Budo," he turned to the still kneeling general. "From now on, the Imperial Guard will answer to you and I as the top authorities. I give you full permission to recruit, fire, and imprison as you see fit among your ranks. Now, if the two of you will excuse me, I'm going to bed," he said, heading for his room. The moment he entered and shut the door, his hand went to his racing heart. "Do not back down, think for yourself," he repeated, changing for a night of rest. Hopefully. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Tatsumi afraid. The fresh and young assassin had just finished his report to the rest of Night Raid, getting stripped and searched by Akane, Leon, and Negenda shortly after for any wounds he might have hidden, and was feeling pretty confident with himself and his accomplishment. Then he started shivering for reasons unknown to him, but he was confident that it had nothing to do with the drafty air, that he was now to be trained by mine, or that Bulat was checking him out. Ichigo tired. The Soul Reaper finally returned to the Night Raid base, feeling drained and exhausted from the entire day of fighting, reaping, and doing his own version of the Ghost of Christmas present for the Child Emperor. He made his way inside the base, looking to claim a bed and just sleep off everything he dealt with that day. That's when Tatsumi ran up to him excitedly. "Hey Ichigo, I had my first mission. This captain of the Imperial Guard that was taking bribes and sentenced innocent people to death," he said, making Ichigo's eye twitch. "I bet he went to..." He didn't even finish as Ichigo backfisted him into a wall. "I'm going to bed," was the only thing the Soul Reaper said after punching the green-eyed assassin. Hail to the king. With Ichigo. The Soul Reaper spent an entire day searching for any information he could on the mountain Numaseka told him about. The information he learned in the Imperial Library is that it was the one place the first emperor was unable to conquer, seeking the power in the mountain to create a tegu with power over gravity. A lone mountain on the fringe of the empire with a crushing weight of gravity denying anyone to claim it, no flora or fauna anywhere on it. Some people even began worshipping the mountain as some kind of god. Well, the hybrid was also here to study. Maybe he could learn to create a new Kaido, using the mountain's unique properties as a base. Those thoughts changed the moment he set foot within the gravity radius. This isn't just gravity, Ichigo thought as he felt the physical weight of gravity on his being. But there was something else that was scaring off all the animals. This is Ryatsu. Hollow Ryatsu. It was the first time he felt hollow Ryatsu of this magnitude since coming to this world. Well, it's been a while since I tangled with Amino's Grand. The hybrid smiled, the hollow nature within him eager for a more appropriate challenge. Releasing his own power, the oppressive weight of the mountain faded. It was not stronger than Ikaibe's palace in the royal realm, and no Ryatsu less than that of a transcendent being would make the hybrid bow. Let's fish you out, Minos. In an instant, Ichigo flashed to the mountain's summit and scanned for either an entrance or to pinpoint where inside the mountain the hollow was hiding. He found no clear entrance at the summit, but he did find where inside the mountain his quarry was. Encasing his fist in Ryushi, Ichigo shot ballas into the heart of the mountain, one after another, digging a widening hole in the mountain until it reached his target. He stopped as the hollow began to stir, instead throwing down a Kaido rope. Bakudo #4, Hinawa. He chanted, shooting down the rope and soon lassoing the Minos. The moment he felt it latch on, he pulled and pulled, forcing the hollow to the surface. It didn't take long to tear the soul from his resting place as he exploded out of the ground. "Vasto Lord," Ichigo said, finally seeing the hollow as it slowly stood back up. "You ruined my nap," he growled, facing Ichigo. He was lean and muscular with long, spiky, dark orange hair, tan skin, and black fur with a skeletal tail and saber-toothed tiger skull mask. "Huh? What's a Soul Reaper doing here? I came here to get away from boring fights." Ichigo kept his focus on the Minos, sensing that he was roughly around Stock's level already. "I'm here to be a Soul Reaper, study the world, gather anything and anyone that might be useful," Ichigo responded, clenching his hands in anticipation for a possible fight. "We are in need of soldiers and I could use some extra hands in quelling hollows and reaping souls. You in or are we going to have to get sweaty?" he asked, evidently surprising the Vasto Lord. "Last I've heard, you Shinigami kill first and don't ask questions," the hollow returned. "Why bother recruiting hollows? War is coming, war with the Quincy." There was a nod of understanding. Soul Society has undergone many changes. One of the main is that hollows made into a Rancor are welcomed among our ranks. Hollows with the powers of Soul Reapers. Ichigo explained before the tiger could ask. "Come to my side, put your power to good use." "And why should I join you?" he asked before looking on in shock as a horned hollow mask materialized on Ichigo's face. "I am Ichigo Kurosaki, future Captain Commander of the Court Guard Squads of Soul Society and the King of Hukomondo," the hybrid declared, making the Vasto Lord grin in anticipation. "You can either choose to join me, or I will force your obedience like a proper hollow. If you really believe in the second option, then you should understand." The Minos flexed his claws, shining blue in the rays of the sun. "I refuse to kneel before anyone weaker than me." He appeared in front of Ichigo, throwing a kick at the hybrid's head. The hybrid blocked the attack effortlessly, but he didn't see the tiger's tail coming until after it stabbed into his chest. It failed to pierce his skin, but it did knock the wind out of him. Before the Minos could retract the skeletal appendage, Ichigo grabbed hold of it and slammed him into the ground a few times before throwing him away. "How do you think I became king of the hollows?" Ichigo growled before flashing in front of the Minos. "Using my charisma." Then the gravity became much heavier, making Ichigo pause in shock as he nearly buckled under the sudden change. The hollow twisted and tried to kick Ichigo in the head again, but the hybrid blocked and caught him by the ankle. "I'm used to far heavier than this," Ichigo said, raising his foot to stomp down on the hollow's face. He managed to counter with a sudden turquoise-colored Siro fired straight from his mouth and into Ichigo's face, causing him to release his opponent's ankle. The hollow swiftly got to his feet and charged forward with a sudden punch to Ichigo's stomach. The results were different than what he expected. "Gah, what are you made of?" he asked, nursing his bruised knuckles before Ichigo dropped a hammer blow to the top of his head and dazed him. Ichigo then got the hollow in a headlock and fell back to slam his skull into the earth, only to start floating in the air. "My control over gravity works both ways," he said before twisting and increasing the gravity to slam Ichigo's head into the ground, then quickly backed away. "In all the thousands of years I've been alive, I was hoping the king would have been able to give me a proper fight." He grinned in delight as Ichigo rose to his feet once again and disappeared from sight. "Please, I haven't even broken a sweat," Ichigo said, appearing behind the Vasto Lord. Before the hollow could fully turn, Ichigo slammed a fist into the masked face of the hollow. The force of the blow fractured the hollow's mask and cratered the ground of the mountain. The Minos attempted to push himself back up, only to have another punch to his spine force him back down. Before Ichigo could continue that assault, he felt the gravity change as he began to float. The hollow managed to push himself to his hands and knees, only to feel Ichigo slam him back into the ground. Had enough? He asked, using a Rise-He construct to push him back to the ground and crush the hollow. Sleeping must have dulled my abilities more than I thought. The Vasto Lord admitted, muffled from his face being buried in the dirt. Probably what I get for not fighting for. I can't even remember how long I've slept. Especially since you haven't even gotten past Phase Fist. Ichigo told him, stepping off his head and walking some distance away. I can sense that you're as strong as the one I appointed as the guardian of the Arankar. But you've yet to actually prove you can fight him, let alone entertain me. So, we're ending this. Ichigo turned to watch his opponent rise to his feet, stumbling as the pain caught up to him. We'll end this with one last move. Try to survive, he said, grasping Zangetsu by the sheath. Well then, if I do, the name's Merrick. Merrick Miyamori. The Vasto Lord said as a black orb appeared in his hand. He then threw it at Ichigo, who thrust the end of Zangetsu at him. The ball blew apart and Merrick lost a chunk of his left side, coughing up blood before collapsing. My Onibai still needs some work, Ichigo said, rubbing his arm from using the technique as he made his way to Merrick. Let's see, fractured ribs, damaged spine, a few cracks in the skull. Ichigo never mastered his healing Kaido, but physical health was one thing all of his teachers made sure he learned. Missing parts of his intestines, left lung, stomach, kidney is gone. Good thing I have that Rise-He printer, he said as Merrick began healing what parts of his body could regenerate. That last move of his was like a compressed ball of gravity. Managed to curve my attack enough to avoid killing him. Well, he suddenly said, waking up and coughing out some more blood. What do you think? Ichigo grabbed him by the back of the neck and hoisted him to eye level. I think I just kicked your ass. Ichigo then put him in another headlock and began dragging him away. And I expect you to follow my orders from now on. When you fully recover and are back to peak condition, I want a rematch. I'm not yet satisfied. Merrick managed to chuckle while trying to keep up. By your command, my king. Back at the capital. That was odd, Ichigo said as he returned to the city. To make a complicated story simple, he brought Merrick to the underground base, used the Hollow's own Rise-He to clone a new kidney, the drain of which knocked him out, and Ichigo spent the rest of the day and most of the next studying and performing the transplant surgery on Merrick, who is now sleeping comfortably under a large pile of rocks. Thank God I know how to translate Urahara's notes now. Otherwise I'd never be able to pull off even half of the technical crap I'm doing. He mused while making his patrol, finding many more souls than usual. What the hell did I miss? The Soul Reaper asked after performing 20 Kanso in half an hour, his answer coming in a cry of anguish. No tilde, he heard someone cry, immediately flashing to the new location. He found Tatsumi and Akame with the corpse of a man whose throat was slashed while his soul was grasping at his ears. He had wild blonde hair, wore a dress shirt and tie with shoulder pads, and had the usual soul chain connected to his chest. I'm dead. Why have the voices returned? Why? He begged. Now you should be wary, Zank, Akame said, speaking aloud without bothering to look for a spirit she couldn't see. Now you will face the judgment of the Shinigami. Then she and Tatsumi left, the boy bowing his head in slight prayer. Zank looked around until he found Ichigo, running at the Soul Reaper before dropping to his knees. God of death, I beg you, he cried out, bowing before Ichigo, and confusing the hell out of the teen. In life, I was an executioner. I thought it was the only way I could be of any service to anyone, killing the guilty for their crimes. But I've executed so many people proclaiming their innocence, I've begun to hear them all the time, begging me for mercy, telling me that they've done nothing wrong, over and over. I just snapped and killed anyone, did anything I could to stop them. I'm sorry to all of them. I can't take it anymore. I'll dive into hell itself and take all of damnation's punishment. Just please silence them, he cried out, tears pouring from his eyes. Ichigo reached down and lifted the man's chin. Are you sure? He asked the murderer. Are you sure that you'll take on all of their pain to repent for your crimes? I just wanted the voices to stop, Zank admitted. I'll face my punishment. Just let them pass on peacefully. He begged before closing his eyes, Ichigo performing the Kanso. As he did so, the voice of Yamamoto spoke in his mind. No soul ever escapes the fate of their judgment, Ichigo. he heard the old man say as the mark he stamped on Zank began to glow, shifting from blue to red rapidly. It is not in their actions, but their intent that is judged. Those that act out of purely selfish desire, the pleasure of self-indulgence, no matter the suffering it brings, they will suffer for eternity. But those that repent, truly repent for their crimes, there is forgiveness. The light settled on blue as Zank faded into the purifying light, tears falling down his face. They've stopped, he said before disappearing for the cycle of rebirth. Back at Night Raid's base, 1 day later. Feeling better? Ichigo asked Merrick, kicking the pile of rocks off of the Vasto Lord. The tiger released a long yawn as he rose to his feet. I'm not going to get any more peaceful sleep under your command, am I? He asked, some measure of regret coloring his tone. The look from his king was all the answer he needed. Understood, and yes, I'm feeling much better, he admitted. Good, then it's time we turn you into an Arankar, Ichigo said, heading over to his tech station and accessing all the knowledge it had on Arankar. Now if I had the Hajoku with me, it should be a simple matter of willing it to happen. But I don't. So we need to try something else. He typed away, analyzing all the data he had and settling on the one Arankar they knew that formed without the power of the Hajoku, Coyote Stack. And how are we going to do this? Merrick asked, looking over Ichigo's shoulder. Do what this guy did. Stack had the unique power to separate his soul into another being. The hybrid returned. As of yet, the researchers in the R&D department are still studying it with limited answers. For now, let's try giving you Soul Reaper abilities. Ichigo stood up and unsheathed Zenjutsu, immediately diving into his inner world. Ichigo's inner world. Do you think this is actually going to work, Zenjutsu? A photo-negative version of Ichigo asked as Ichigo appeared in the sideways city, every surface rippling like water with every step on it. You'll be sacrificing a sword to do this. They have no personality or freedom anyway. Kyoka Suijutsu, a female version of Aizen, rose from the glass windows and took a place by Ichigo's side. It's no different than cutting a nail to this boy. Besides, how else can I create more Soul Reapers and Arankar? Ichigo asked of his main Zanpakuto spirit. Zanjutsu sighed as a katana formed in his hands, black and white Raizhi bleeding away and being reabsorbed into the sword spirit. It'll feel just like that time when you used Mugetsu, he warned before Ichigo left his inner world. Back outside. There it is, Ichigo grunted out, feeling a part of his soul separate from himself, while a completely blank Zanpakuto formed in his other hand. That should do it. Merrick took gentle hold of his king's shoulders as the disorientation of the act caught up to the team. I'm fine now, Merrick, he told the Vasto Lord, returning to stand tall and dignified before presenting the sword to his latest vassal. Take this blade, mix your Raizhi into it, let it become part of you, and evolve into an Arankar. Yes, my king, Merrick said, taking the sword into his hands and began pouring his Raizhi into it. Ichigo watched as the process began, strong winds blowing out as the sword began absorbing his Raizhi, taking his hollow form, leaving him bare of his fur and his mask reduced to the saber-toothed fangs on his cheeks. The sword itself began to change into a dual-bladed Naginata glaive. Then the pair began to glow. Come on, work, Ichigo thought, demanding and hoping the process would result in a success. There was a bright flash, revealing that Merrick was now in a full-body cast of the same material as a hollow mask. Ichigo walked up to the statue and placed his hand upon it, feeling out the Raizhi. Well, guess all that's left is to let you stabilize as a new Arankar, he said, leaving the soon-to-be-evolved hollow to undergo his change. After setting up a couple of scanners and a camera, hey, he needed data. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Leon's Failed Seduction. So, is there anything special you can share with us? Leon asked, hugging the Soul Reaper from behind and purposefully rubbing her chest against him. Boss said that the higher-ups wanted us to either recruit or kill him, but getting information should be enough. He does seem like he can go wherever he wants and has made a few trips to the palace if certain intel can be believed, she thought as she continued to rub her assets against him, and getting no reaction. I mean, any information that can help us spare that young emperor you're so keen on having us let live, right? She said, moving in front and bending over to show off her cleavage. I'll let his actions speak for him, Leon. Ichigo said, not even looking up from his book and the various danger beasts in the world. Also, I've seen bigger and better, he told her, and Leone felt her confidence shatter. Tatsumi's love life begins. Wha the hell dosh he mean bigger and better? Leone yelled out, clearly drunk and rambling to the others about her failure with Ichigo. Aren't I sexy? Well, we don't know who he spends time with. Bulat reasoned while Leone chugged another pint. It's entirely possible he's met with a love goddess or even has beautiful women sacrifices he took as his brides. Who are we to question godlike beings? Are you saying I'm not good enough to be his bitch? Leone demanded from her teammate. Yaushge anyway, show what do you know? Well, I still think you're sexy, Leone, Lubbock declared without shame. Yeah, whatever. Pervert. The lion girl immediately dismissed. Well, I still think you're beautiful, big sis, Tatsumi admitted, looking embarrassed but happy to say it. Oh Tatsumi, you're show *hic*sh wheat, she cried, hugging the boy into her boobs. Why does he get a face full of that rack? Lubbock demanded. Cutting strings. With Esdeath. Normally she'd be a picture of power and grace. Normally she'd let her soldiers indulge in their primal wants and desires after conquering a nation or village. Normally she'd present herself in that perfect standard of the strongest in the empire after returning to the capital after such a victory. And normally she'd go through the torture chambers to indulge in the screams of the weak. Things that were once normal were quickly fading ever since that Soul Reaper appeared. She still held herself to the same grace, as was expected of her, when she marched through the streets of the capital with her dragon and 3 beasts, but immediately made her way to the castle to give her report. You look like shit, Budo said, being the one inside the castle walls to give the icy general her welcome. Were the northern tribes stronger than you expected? He taunted as Esdeath chose to ignore him, electing to make her way into the throne room, where the Prime Minister and the Emperor waited. When she finally arrived, she noticed that the Emperor seemed to have a different air about him. She said nothing but continued to observe before kneeling before the monarch. Seeing the Prime Minister seem a bit more agitated than usual helped her conclude that Honest may be losing control of many things. Likely Ichigo was to blame. He even said that Budo told him about her sadistic nature. Welcome back, General Esdeath, Makoto greeted, his usual tone that was ingrained in him to hold when dealing with matters of state. Your conquest of the north was excellent and will be rewarded with 10,000 gold pieces. Though, I'm somewhat concerned with the news that your army is on the march back. Care to explain? The enemy army was utterly crushed and not a single soldier was left alive, she answered. Shortly after that, the Soul Reaper appeared and tested my strength. There were casualties and I did not have the military force left to keep hold of the territory. Not a lie, but not the whole truth. He knew she was effective and thorough. He didn't need to know of her sadistic tendencies. My lord, this requires action, Honest cried out. If what the general says is true, then Ichigo has broken his word on his neutrality. What's to stop him from siding with the rebels or strike at any of us? I agree with Honest, Budo spoke up. With Esdeath's army cut to size and her own condition, the military might of the empire has taken considerable damage. Honest and Esdeath both glared at the military leader, but said nothing in the presence of the emperor. Her own condition. Are you badly injured, General? Makoto asked, genuinely concerned for the woman. My fight with Ichigo Kurosaki has left a lasting injury that my medics insist I get looked at by one of the palace doctors, Esdeath answered, tensing up after another cardiac episode before starting to wheeze from the pain. I felt that making my report was more important to the morale of the soldiers and people than to see me displaying any sort of weakness, she admitted before standing up to alleviate the pain to her damaged heart and lungs. Unacceptable, Makoto yelled out, standing from his throne. While in this time of crisis, you are expected to keep in good health, General Esdeath. I order you to see our top doctors and get this fixed. I have need of you to deal with this night raid epidemic. Those assassins have been causing us no end of grief. Honest had a smug smirk. Budo seemed to be patiently waiting. Understood, Your Majesty, Esdeath said, bowing to the Emperor as he sat back down. However, I've heard that this group has many Tegu users and would like to request Tegu users for my own force to combat them. Anything less than a Tegu would only result in failure in this endeavor, Your Majesty. Budo chimed in. If anyone can handle this night raid group, it would be her. You can trust her judgment. Makoto seemed to ponder the words of the generals, Honest gnashing his teeth silently while glaring at the lightning user. If you say so, Budo, the young emperor finally said. Honest, I'll leave the matter of gathering Esdeath's Tegu users to you. Honest forced himself to put his gentle mask back on and was ready to say something, but never got the chance to. Budo, I request you set up your own investigative team. Try to find anything that connects the victims together and bring that information to us. The ice general was shocked. The change in the air of the palace now explained. Honest's careful control of the capital seemed to be falling apart. With Ichigo. I've been in this world for almost 2 months, Ichigo said aloud as he typed away at his computer and keeping his journal audio logs, and I've only just recently begun the secondary aspects of my being here, recruitment and study of the discoveries of this realm. He turned to the calcified statue of the new Arankar. First actual recruit is a Vasto Lord, turning Arankar, named Merrick Mayamori. Special abilities involve gravity manipulation. We'll work on training those skills and development to improve. He typed away a command on the keys and deactivated a scanner, revealing the green eye of the Tegu spectator. Second, I've begun my full analysis into this world's ultimate weapons, Tegu. He grabbed the eye-based tool and looked deep into its emerald gaze. 48 of these were in existence, with half being destroyed in a previous civil war, and the remaining 24 being used in the current civil war. The abilities of the Tegu are quite varied. Some control elements, some are armor, some are support types, and a general rule in this world seems to be only a Tegu user can fight another Tegu user. I've seen 8 Tegu in action, with a few proving to be useful. The Tegu spectator is a very dangerous one in the right hands as it pushes the power of sight to its maximum. Abilities include seeing great distances, seeing through objects, seeing into people's minds, allowing some measure of precognition, and controlling what someone sees. Aizen has displayed how dangerous such a power can be, but the power of a Tegu requires compatibility. He said before putting the Tegu down. I've analyzed the other Tegu among the group, Night Raid, and am convinced that some can be replicated, but others require more samples to study. Maybe Tegu can be used to empower the Monsouls in Project Spearhead, but require more testing. Ichigo then sensed someone entering his underground facility. The Rise He printer proves to be invaluable to my needs, easily creating anything I need so long as I can visualize it and can supply the Rise He necessary. The latest creation is a device Ulquira revealed to me that Aizen invented. A bracelet that covers one in a shell of spirit energy that makes one invisible to anyone but the creatures that supplied the Rise He to make it. In this case, only I can sense whoever wears this bracelet. It also allows for intangibility at will, making it a perfect stealth tool for this world. However, I feel more tests should be done. Ichigo said before suddenly reaching out and grabbing Lubbock by the arm. Ah, that hurts. The green-haired pervert cried out as Ichigo squeezed on the arm and removed the bracelet from the assassin's wrist. End log. The hybrid said before closing the audio logs and turning back to Lubbock. So, how was the test? The string user grinned as Ichigo released him. It was amazing, he exclaimed, clearly very impressed. This is definitely on par with a Tegu. I spent the whole day using it, and no one ever noticed me. I even got to spy on all the girls in the group. Lubbock got a nosebleed. Leon's luscious curves, Shiel's elegant bod, Akim's toned form. I saw it all. It was glorious. Except for the boss. I respect her too much to peep on her. He said, Ichigo nodding along and recording the data, knowing that Lubbock's going to hate him later. With these, we could. Stopping you there, the answer is no. Ichigo said, quickly shooting down the request before Lubbock could really ask it. I didn't make this to give you guys an edge. I will repeat this, Lubbock. I'm not on your side, I'm not on the Empire's side, I'm on my side, the side with the least number of innocent people dying. Not helping assassins or a tyrannical government. This is for me to use as I see fit. But what's the point? The string user asked. Once you go spirit, you're invisible to the world. Why would you need this? That's for me to know. The hybrid said, pocketing the bracelet for later while returning the Tegu. Now get out. I've still got things I need to do. He returned to his computer, typing away and recording more data before grabbing onto the thread of the tegu crosstail that Lubbock had around the bracelet the instant it began to move. "I'm not an idiot, Lubbock," he called out, severing the string with a single slash of his Zanpakuto, followed by the pervert cursing and hurriedly running away. "Idiot," Ichigo whispered as he ensured that the Ryamaku bracelet was in fact in his possession, releasing a Pesquisa pulse to finalize that it was there. "Good," he stayed inside the base, he said before placing the thread into the scanner, but before he could pay any attention to the data he was receiving from the tegu, Merrick's shell began to crack. "That took long enough." The Soul Reaper sighed, setting his computer to the Rise printer and began printing out white fabric. With that done, he walked over to his soon-to-be Arankar as the cracks continued to spread until the white shell exploded, leaving a naked Merrick kneeling on the ground and his dual-blade Naginata in front of him. "Do you remember who you are?" Ichigo asked. "Yes, my lord," Merrick answered, grabbing his blade and pushing himself up. "I am Merrick Mayamori, Arankar Knight to the King of Hukomundo, Ichigo Kurosaki." He stood to his full height, tall and strong with a tiger tattoo appearing on his left side. "I am ready to serve you, my king." "Good. We'll discuss what to do later. For now, get dressed," Ichigo ordered, pointing to the 100 feet of white cloth and sewing kits. "I'm heading out. Wait for my return," he said before flashing away to reap the dead. In the palace, hours had passed and the day once more gave way to night, bathing the world in a crimson glow before the streets became alighted with the nightlife of the capital. The number of spirits occupying the city was nearing more manageable levels. Having his intense speed was always helpful, but it was just one city and the number of people dying hasn't declined enough in his opinion. He needed more help, more Shinigami. He'd have Merrick assist, but he still doesn't know the results of that experiment Mayuri and Urahara were working on. The only other option was to recruit a soul with the potential of being a Soul Reaper, then train them to become Soul Reapers. The question is who it could be? Ichigo asked himself, entering the palace with impunity yet again. Easy to infiltrate when there is literally no way to stop him. The closest thing he found to empowered humans were those with tegu, and there were not enough tegu in the world to mount a defense against spirits. He stopped in his tracks as he noticed a familiar icy presence in the area. Guess Esteth finally made it back, the hybrid mused as he made his way through the palace. "I've assembled my team, and they are starting with those that night raid have already killed recently, my lord," Budo said as Ichigo came upon a trio of him, Makoto, and Honest, with the young emperor heading for his bedroom. They began their search with a wealthy family when people began noting some wretched odors on the property, finding a warehouse full of corpses. All of the victims appeared to have been tortured to death. "And this was happening directly under our noses?" Makoto demanded, sounding furious. "Many things are slipping under the cracks, my lord," Honest said, masking his agitation. "The rebellion is distracting us all, and they knew how to cover their tracks, I would assume. Maybe I should decree surprise searches among the upper-class citizens." The emperor contemplated. "See if any more dirty secrets are in the works." "I must advise against it, your majesty," Honest voiced. "One case does not set the standard. Such an act might encourage discontent." "I agree. Wait until further evidence is obtained, your majesty," Budo told his lord. "Rest assured, we will protect this nation." Makoto smiled gratefully before shutting the door. Honest and Budo went their separate ways and Ichigo phased right through that door. "Look at you," Ichigo said after putting on his Gigi ring, acting like a proper emperor now. Makoto jumped as Ichigo came in, but sighed in relief at the sight of the Shinigami. "You've definitely made a lot of progress from the naive little puppet I first met." "Not enough progress," the emperor argued back. "I'd like to start projects to help the common people, but even Budo advised against it. Said to hold off until any threats to such policies have been dealt with. Narcotics and any organized crime group that may take advantage of the situation. It did make sense, ensure the country and people were safe before anything else. What good was food or medicine if they could easily be stolen and replaced with drugs? So, are we going on another tour of the capital?" Makoto asked, bracing himself for more of the rotten city that was his home. "Something similar, actually," Ichigo said, fishing out the Ryamaku bracelet. "Put this on," he ordered, letting the child slip the silver band onto his wrist. So long as you wear that, you are invisible to the world. Only I can see and hear you, and there are no barriers that can stop you. Ichigo pointed to the door. Try it. Makoto took a breath, walked up to the door, placed his hand on it, and sank through like it was not even there. Wow, that was amazing, he said, muffled by the wall between them. Ichigo removed his Gigi ring and followed after the monarch, who was phasing through walls and being unnoticed by the guards. Ichigo, this is more impressive than any Tegu I've seen, he cheered, running up to the Soul Reaper and taking his hand. Can I keep it? The Emperor begged, holding on to and seeing Ichigo despite him being in spirit form. This requires further study, the hybrid thought before kneeling before Makoto. No, Makoto, I should hold on to it when you're not using it. The kid looked sad, but seemed to start catching on. To keep it out of dangerous hands, right? Ichigo smiled and nodded, proud that the boy was growing into his own. Okay, so what was it that you wanted to show me? Let's go see Honest without the mask he wears around you. The Emperor nodded and began leading Ichigo through the castle, listening to the staff and searching for the fat ass that was the Prime Minister. They heard someone say that he was visiting with General Esdeath and began making their way to the hospital wing of the palace. It didn't take the pair long before they found their quarry, Esdeath in a hospital bed with a near-invisible scar on her chest and Honest sitting at her bedside. Didn't think that he'd care so much, the Prime Minister said when they got into earshot. In retrospect, we should have expected that he'd be stronger than what we saw. God is still in his title, even if he prefers Soul Reaper. Still, to cause you so much damage, he whispered, rubbing his beard in contemplation. If we could get any kind of sample of him, we could find something that could quell him. If you can secure such a sample for yourself, you're welcome to try. Esdeath returned, scratching at her nearly invisible scar and staring directly at Ichigo. But I doubt you'd be capable of succeeding there. You'd never know if death is watching. Ichigo's eyes narrowed at the ice user, reminding himself how sharp her instincts were and wondering why she wasn't saying anything about him being there. He could be making frequent trips here to talk to the Emperor. He doesn't seem as mindless as you'd like him to be. She sent a smirk to Honest, who growled in irritation. That brat is getting annoying independent. I didn't spend all this time to lose control this easily, he admitted, frowning all the while. And now Budo is actually doing something about this instead of focusing on the rebellion. I may have to frame Budo for treason. He might be supplying information to our enemies, so it might work. Makoto had a look of betrayal on his face as he listened, both he and Ichigo remaining silent as the exchange continued. I doubt him telling Ichigo about my habits counts as treason, Esdeath said, despite Honest not paying attention. And if worse comes to worse, I'll just poison that brat. Makoto felt his heart break. Have to be more careful than when I killed his parents. Children are just so fragile, I might kill him by accident. Need him to be the puppet I want. You fat bastard, Makoto screeched, charging at Honest before Ichigo pulled him back. Let me go, Ichigo. Quiet, the hybrid roared, instilling fear into the boy with the gravity of his presence. There may be more and you must learn to control your emotions. Makoto growled furiously as they continued to watch. By the way, I need you to make some people disappear, Honest told the general. They may threaten my ruling here if they manage to come. Very well, Esdeath agreed. I'll see what I can do. In exchange, I want to organize a tournament. Honest looked at her questioningly. My latest scheme to get Ichigo to come to me. Fighting him backfired, so I'll hold the audience hostage. In exchange for their safety, he'll do something for me. Both smiled sadistically before Esdeath frowned. I'll repeat this, Honest. Trying to secure any kind of sample off of him will be your responsibility. I want something else from the Soul Reaper. Honest's smile faded into a frown and glare, but he agreed and left. Ichigo released the child monarch, who was shaking furiously. This is the face of corruption, Ichigo said, before Makoto ran off. Ichigo easily followed the Emperor as they phased through walls until reaching Budo's private study, where the kid pulled off the bracelet. General Budo, Makoto shouted, surprising the general as his master appeared literally out of thin air. I want Honest arrested and executed for high treason. Ichigo appeared in the room himself, putting on his Gigi ring. I'd be happy to do so, my lord, but what brought this on? Budo asked, already accepting what was happening because Ichigo was involved. He murdered my parents, plans to frame you for treason, and plans to poison me, the emperor growled out. We watched honest while invisible. Ichigo quickly explained, Budo merely nodding in understanding. Any time away from Makoto to watch the prime minister show his true colors was enough to justify the child's actions. It took all of Budo's power to keep his own emotions under control as he knelt before his leader. Your Highness, I would be glad to have him arrested and executed for his actions, but forgive me for this, he said while Makoto looked furious at the thought of Budo betraying him too. Do you have any evidence? Evidence? I don't need evidence, the kid roared. I'm the emperor. If I want him dead, your only concern is killing him. Then you're not any different from him, Ichigo suddenly said, shocking Makoto with the accusation. Doing things like that, because I said so, is no different than how Honest is doing things. You need to gather evidence to justify your claims. That's what separates just kings from tyrants. You want to be a proper king, yes? Makoto nodded, tears falling down his face from the thought of just how much he must have failed his people. Then you need to do things the right way. Budo will gather the evidence for you. When that is done, then you may have him face his judgment. Makoto reluctantly nodded as Ichigo slipped the bracelet back on and took the emperor back to his room. He had faced enough for today. Days later, Ichigo wished he could say that the end of the empire's corruption was within sight, wished that there would be substantially fewer deaths all around. Unfortunately for him and those involved, it wasn't to be. Mainly because Honest knew how to cover his tracks and, without reasonable evidence, they couldn't sanction more in-depth searches. Makoto seemed to be getting smarter, much to Ichigo and Budo's pleasure and Honest's chagrin, by keeping Esdeath and her 3 beasts in the capital to recruit and train new soldiers to join her army, and they had to stick around until the recruits were satisfactory with Budo and Esdeath as judges. During that time, Budo made a list of possible targets that he gave to Ichigo, who gave it to Negenda, to give to the rebellion leaders, on orders of the emperor. Not that the rebels knew all the details and were just happy for the intel. Ichigo also made it a point to find and recover Esdeath's damaged organs from this really flamboyant scientist called Dr. Stylish. Wasn't sure which made him more uncomfortable, the heart and lungs he stole or the campy scientist. The point of that was that Esdeath's tegu was mixed with her blood, and he didn't want to risk another person with Esdeath's powers running around. One unstable crimincer was enough in his opinion. During that time, Tatsumi was trained by Shield and Leon, failed to be compatible with Spectator, and Night Raid continued their assassinations. Merrick had a bit of a fashion disaster that was later rectified by Mine after an accidental activation of the soul projector gave her quite a show. Now he wore a white vest with a black tank top and white pants. Since then, Merrick was patrolling the outskirts of the capital for any useful hollows or other spirits, while Ichigo continued to reap souls and pray that someone had the potential of becoming a soul reaper to aid him. This mess vexes me greatly, Ichigo thought in annoyance, despite having a relatively slow day. He did send a Pimpa to hell, though he was beginning to feel something odd from the gates of hell as of late. Suddenly he noticed a bright flash of light, along with a dying life force. One more, then I'll call it a night, he thought to himself as he made his way to where the light flashed. He sensed no hollows, and thus no urgency. He soon found a large force of Imperial Guard, each looking horrified, loud crunching, and some rather demented laughter. That's when he saw them, a giant plush-like dog eating an arm and a brown-haired girl that was missing both of hers. Papa, I defeated the evil villain on my own, she said happily. The light of justice shines on this world. Ahahaha, she continued to laugh. Ichigo glanced at the arm that was soon swallowed by the beast, recognizing the pale purple sleeve. If I had any regrets, Ichigo heard a familiar voice from beside him, it's that I can't hug Tatsumi anymore. Could you let me say goodbye to everyone myself, Ichigo? He turned to see Shield, with bloodied bite marks on her body and a bullet hole on her chest, directly over her soul chain. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Why Lubbock hates Ichigo. Jackass has no idea the amount of good we could do if we all had those bracelets, he grumbled while stomping his way through the base. Then he was sucker-punched by a transformed Leon, with Mine and Shield glaring at him. Akim was just there. What was that for? Do the words, Leon's luscious curves, Shield's elegant bod, Akim's toned form, I saw it all mean anything? Leon growled. cracking her knuckles while Lubbock broke into a cold sweat. Ichigo said you were testing something for him, but he never said you were supposed to peep. And what about me? Nothing? Mine roared before they began mercilessly beating on the pervert. Ichigo, you traitor. Ichigo steals Esdeath's heart. The heart of General Esdeath. Stylish said gleefully, looking at the prized organ he took from the general. He was a tall man with spiky black hair with a white patch in it, wore a yellow suit under his white lab coat, and glasses over his blue eyes. Such a graceful creature, to power through such extensive damage and completely adapt to that danger beast transplant. It would be my great pleasure to work further with you, dear General. He looked away for a second to write something down. Maybe I'll make you a personal squad of lesser ice users to co. He froze when all of the organs were missing. Ah. It's like Yumichika, except I hate him, Ichigo said, clutching his visceral prize. What's going on in Soul Society? Well, he's certainly not wrong, Mayuri said as they received the data and audio logs that Ichigo recorded, not knowing that it was immediately sent to Squad 12 every time. Some of those tegu certainly sound interesting. If only I had the same materials, we could try to make our own versions. Only way that would happen is if Ichigo sent them via Garganta. Urahara said, already thinking about which improvements could be made and how to recreate some others. Should we let him know we're watching though? Depends on how desperate he is. Best to wait for when he'll be the least upset with our spying. Mayuri returned, tapping his fingers like he was irritated. Still, would like for him to test my drugs and toxins sooner rather than later. New factions. With Ichigo. I am not looking forward to this, Ichigo thought as he held out a hand for the dead assassin. Shield took it and they began their trek to the night raid base, relatively slowly for Ichigo but still rather fast for the fresh spirit. It soon began to rain when they reached the night raid base, as if the sky shared in the somber feel of the area, evidenced by an injured mine giving the bad news to the rest of the team. Ichigo didn't even bother to question how the sniper beat him here. At least mine got here safely, Shield said, smiling that her sacrifice wasn't in vain as the pair scanned the faces of the assassins. There were tears, rage, disbelief, and sorrow. All things that Ichigo expected to find when he considered how much everyone there loved Shield. But the only comfort he could provide now was simply the chance to say goodbye. Merrick was already conveniently waiting with the soul projector ready. Probably got it started the moment he saw mine return without her partner. Where's the person that did this mine? Tatsumi growled, rage and hate evident in his voice. Ichigo slipped on his gigi ring while Merrick brought the projector over for Shield. What are you planning on doing, Tatsumi? Magenda asked her green subordinate, probably knowing full well what he was planning, just as Ichigo manifested on the physical plane. Get revenge, he growled out, looking downright vicious. But a vicious cub was still a cub all the same. Anger makes you stupid, Tatsumi, Ichigo calmly stated, getting the group's attention. A proper warrior, especially an assassin, must be in full control of their emotions at all times. Ooh dare. Tatsumi whispered out a growl before storming up to the Soul Reaper. Don't you dare lecture me about anything. For all that talk of inaction, you have been getting pretty involved. Fighting Esdeath, gathering information. Do you simply decide on a whim what you can or can't do? Did you stand by and watch Shield die because you can't involve yourself? Do you even know what it's like to lose a fry? Ichigo silenced him with a harsh backfist, sending Tatsumi tumbling into the dirt. I am all too familiar with that, Ichigo admitted, thinking back to when Senna died as the Shinenju, to when Kon died protecting his mother and sisters, to when his sisters were still captured despite Kon's efforts. But all I've ever done was prevent a massacre in my name and slowly free a child from his prison of naivety. Don't mistake me for what I am not, because I am a Soul Reaper. I'm on no one's side but my own. He looked to Merrick and nodded, prompting the Arankar to activate the projector and reveal Shield. Say your goodbyes and follow me to the underground. I don't think they can handle watching you fade away, he said as he began to move, already bringing out another Asuachi blade and going into his underground cavern to wait for Shield and Merrick. Almost an hour passed before the pair finally made their way down to the underground, Shield standing tall with all the dignity and grace she could muster, only for that to be ruined as she tripped and fell over. Hopefully I'm not so clumsy in my next life, be it heaven or hell. she said, trying to pass it off like a joke. Merrick helped the poor airhead back up while Ichigo himself walked over. Shield had a look of quiet acceptance and closed her eyes, waiting for the tap that would decide her eternal fate. When it never came, she opened her eyes to the sight of the Shinigami holding out a katana. "I actually have a different plan for you, Shield," Ichigo said, noting the confusion on the girl's face. "As you know, I am but one man and only one Reaper trying to help all the souls of the dead in this world. This is not something I can do alone. I've only just recently made the capital manageable with helping Makoto care for his people and limiting the number of those executed in prison. But the dead keep coming. I've still the rest of the empire to worry about, but I can't leave the capital without a Soul Reaper, and Merrick can't perform the necessary duties." "Are you suggesting that I—" she started, shocked by the suggestion, and even more when Ichigo nodded. "But the only things I've ever been good at was killing and comforting Tatsumi. I don't think I can be a proper Shinigami." "Why do you think I carry a Zanpakuto, or why it transforms?" Ichigo asked, demanding the girl's attention. "Because it looks nice? Because it's cool? No, I carry these blades because there are foes only those with high spiritual power can fight. The corrupted souls of the dead, hollows. Those large, white-masked danger beasts that appeared when you first showed up," she asked, managing to remember the various monsters that flashed into existence for a short while when Ichigo first came to their world. "Yes, and like any other soul of the dead, they too deserve their judgment and rest," the Reaper admitted. "They just require some rougher treatment, like fighting and killing them. I'm not forcing this on you. This is my offer. Become a Soul Reaper, slay the hollows that will appear when I leave the city, reap the dead that I can't." Shield paused to think before reaching for the blade, only to freeze when Ichigo spoke again. "But know that you can't interact with Night Raid. If you did, they'll start making annoying demands of me, or requests of you. You are no longer part of that war, but now part of mine. The equal treatment of all souls and exclusion from the affairs of the living. If you break this rule, I'll devour your soul." It may be harsh, but that's the way he needed to be. She'd break the rules and try to help Night Raid in any way she could, but that's not the world of the Shinigami. She eventually grabbed onto the sheath of the blade. "If I can be useful, I will take that chance," the former assassin finally admitted. "I will join you in your mission." Ichigo smiled, partly relieved to finally have some help, successfully recruiting his first Soul Reaper, and because, he was also fond of Shield. She seemed like she needed an older brother, despite the fact that she was older. "Good girl. Your training begins now," he said before ripping the Zanpakuto out of her hands and tossing it to Merrick. "Shield, go retrieve your sword. Merrick, keep her from doing so, but not too harshly," he said before heading over to his computer while the budding Shinigami and a Rancor Knight played Keep Away. Timeskip, back at the capital. A couple days passed since Shield's death and acceptance to become a Soul Reaper. Though her retrieval of her blade was clever, it was also out of pity because how that attempt went. Her training began in earnest and Tatsumi began to push himself in his own training after Akame let her mask of indifference slip. Ichigo had to wonder just what kind of life she had to live up to this point, and how many comrades she must have lost before thinking of how many the other captains in the Gotai must have lost themselves. He pushed himself to be as strong as he was so that he wouldn't have to know that pain. Not everyone was allowed that luxury, and it was close to affecting his judgment. He wanted to comfort Akame, he wanted to help train Tatsumi, but was it his right to do so? Meanwhile, away from the assassins and the Shinigami, the Prime Minister informed Makoto and Esdeath that her Tegu users have arrived, and Budo gave Esdeath's military recruits his blessing on their ability, and her army was back to full strength again. Esdeath could now send her 3 beasts to assassinate Honest's political opponents. However, it wouldn't do to leave without testing her new team members. In a room designated as the Special Police Meeting Room, the team had gathered. A dark-haired man in heavy clothing from the Imperial Navy named Wave, and shirtless man with a mask from the Incineration Squad named Boars. A black-haired girl with a massive sweet tooth named Kurom. A brown-haired girl with cybernetic arms named Suryu and her dog Tegu Koro, who ushered in Dr. Stylish. And finally a blonde and fair-looking man with the air of a scholar about him named Ran. "So, before we go hunt some new prey, Lady Esdeath wants us to test her new subordinates," Niall asked his team members, all 3 wearing different types of masks. Why doesn't she do that herself? I think she's waiting to make sure she's ready to go round 2 with that Shinigami bastard. Deidara suggested as they reached the door. Wouldn't mind getting a few hits on that guy myself for what he did to Lady Esdeath. Now you two, it's time to focus. River scolded as they prepared their little surprise. Niao took his place on the far side of the hall and brought his recorder Tegu to his lips, ready to play its hypnotic and dangerous tunes. Deidara and River stormed into the room, surprising a few among the group, with Wave acting on that surprise. What the hell is with these weaklings? The battle fanatic demanded, purposefully goading them into action. Wave took the bait. Hey, we were all called here to... He didn't even finish his statement before Deidara slammed his fist into the boy's gut, sending him flying. Why are you so open? River demanded as he pulled out a sword and began attacking Ran, who nimbly dodged. There's one that has potential, the former general thought as he felt a spike of killing intent appear behind him, only for Deidara to knock Suryu aside. You need to control your bloodlust, girly. He scolded as a faint hum began to play. Surprisingly enough, Ran immediately sprouted wings and shot feathers through the wall, roughly around Niao's location. Kuro moved on the offensive herself, moving so quickly that she nearly decapitated River. The only thing stopping that was fast reflexes and quick use of his black marlin to control water, pushing her away from him at the last moment. Definitely needs some work, but you'll do for now, River finally said, giving the 6 a passing grade as the 3 beasts revealed themselves. The reveal surprised the new team, though Wave was the most vocal and demanded answers. Did you really think that we'd let a bunch of untested nobodies be our beloved general's teammates without proving themselves? Deidara answered, angering Wave easily while the rest kept their composure. Some of you barely make the cut. That's for me to decide. They heard someone speak out as Esdeath appeared in the room. I hope the 3 of you had fun and they passed your test, she asked, getting nods from her bodyguards. Good, now you have your own mission, so get to it. The Ice Master ordered, prompting the 3 of them to leave. Meanwhile, the rest of you will have to go through a test of mine, she announced, the entire team getting ready for action. But that will come later. For now, we must go present ourselves to the Emperor, and I have a tournament to host. She pulled out one of the posters made for the event. The mark of her Tegu with crossed blades and a skull mask with vertical red lines over the eyes. I'm sure it'll be quite the show. The next day. The good news is that our decoy plan managed to succeed and we've a few more allies, Budo informed the Emperor as they traveled to the audience chamber. Bad news is that they caught on and still eliminated most of them, and my forces are getting spread a little thin in trying to protect our side. After hearing about Honest's desire to get rid of some people, Budo made a list of possible targets and tried to contact them to get them to the capital safely or with the revolutionaries as the alternative, most important of which was the previous prime minister, a man named Chowry, and his daughter bodyguard named Spear. They successfully reached the capital, but they knew that Honest wouldn't give up, so they have a constant watch of bodyguards. Normal assassins are of mild concern, Budo, Makoto told his leading general. The bigger concern is if Honest will conscript a Tegu user to act against us. How many Tegu users in the capital could he use as assassins? Budo took a moment to think. Night Raid would be concerned with keeping them alive, so they're out, he quickly said. 2 of the Jaegers would do it outright while the rest would be tricked. Then there's Esdeath's 3 beasts, who seem to be the assassins Honest is currently using. Makoto bit his thumb, trying to judge his position. Despite Honest's poisoned words being dripped in his ear, the kid did have what it took to be a good leader. He just needed to lose his naive trust and blind faith. The killer, Zank the Beheader, what was his Tegu? He suddenly asked, getting an idea. Spectator? Yes, your majesty. Wait, are you planning? Budo asked, knowing that the Tegu was either with Night Raid or the rebellion. What do you think it'll take to get them to give us Spectator? Budo's eyes widened in shock. The rebel army and Night Raid were still traitors despite aiming for the same goals. His prejudice about those that threatened the kingdom still held on, against his better judgment. If anything, my lord, we should leave that to Ichigo. He knows where they are and can negotiate for both sides. Then keep up your guard until we speak with him again. Do whatever it takes to keep them safe. The monarch ordered as he and Budo entered the audience chamber. Old man Chowry, Makoto said cheerfully, putting on the mask of a child rather quickly. So good to see you again. Are you coming out of retirement? While the young lord and retired civil servant spoke, Budo's eyes met with Honest's. A smug and victorious grin came on the general's face while the prime minister glared and ripped into a large bird drumstick. Yes, my lord, the outskirts of the empire gave a little perspective to this old man and ideas that would be put to better use in serving the realm. Chowry smiled, charmed by his adorable monarch and eager to help him on restoring the kingdom. That's wonderful, but what should you do? He said before wondering. Honest is still the acting prime minister, and I can't just hand that position back to you automatically. To most others, it was just a child facing a conundrum. To Budo it was a code. How to get him to do his job and keep him safe from anything Honest can do. Well, why not appoint him to a parliamentary position? Budo suggested. The members of the imperial civil offices are among the most secure. Someone on the inside would have to actively conspire against another member to get one killed. Honest began gnashing his teeth as Makoto agreed and appointed the former prime minister to co-prime minister until a better-sounding name could be decided. Esdeath's tournament. The day Esdeath waited for finally came. The stands were full. The prize money enticed many to apply. The grand prize of the Tegu Extase and a guaranteed position in the newly established Jaegers would ensure that the competitors give it their all. But that was all pointless to her real goal, getting to Ichigo. She had to contain her excitement when his name appeared on the roster, and it was clear that he was going to win the whole tournament. She knew he'd come, but she still felt her heart pound at the chance to reunite with him, even if it meant possibly painful repercussions by his hand. In the east corner, Ichigo Kurosaki, Wave announced, being given that job by the general and did so with enthusiasm. In the west corner, Nobunaga of the dry goods store. The Soul Reaper walked onto the stage with his opponent facing opposite of him, who seemed to be a feudal samurai with a pointed mustache and goatee. And, he almost said before Ichigo held up his hand and waved Wave over to him. The young Navy man saw nothing wrong with that and went over, Ichigo immediately snatching the microphone away. Hello again, Esdeath, he said, focusing on the general. How about we save us all some time, and I just fight everyone all at once? I promise not to kill them. This, predictably, infuriated the other contestants with his cockiness, while Esdeath smiled at the chance to study Ichigo's ability yet again. Fine, the general announced to the public, and I'll pay 10 times the prize money to each of the other contestants if you lose. This shocked the entire group for a moment before they crowded around Ichigo, who took center stage of the arena. Wave had to get off before announcing the battle to start. And begin, he called out, triggering the start of the battle. The instant they began to move, a crushing pressure came down over everyone within the combat area. Even Wave was caught up in it, though this confused the entire audience. Esdeath, however, was familiar with what happened. The sheer weight of power of her chosen one. Soon enough, each and every person in the arena passed out from the strain and collapsed before Ichigo let up his Ryatsu. Wave was the only one still conscious. Disqualified, he called out, gasping for air. I don't know how, but that was cheating. Take a break, Wave. Esdeath called down, descending from her place in the stands. I'll examine him for any tool he may have used. The young man did as ordered and went over to the entrance, where Boris came out with water and concern for his teammate. You do know that this was supposed to entertain the masses, right? She asked with a knowing smile. Ichigo watched a fine mist appear around the people as they talked about what they just saw. Don't be coy with me, you icy bitch, the hybrid growled. You and I both know what you're doing. Now what do you want? She smiled and got in close, acting like she was looking for evidence of cheating despite knowing that there was nothing to find. I want 2 things actually, she finally said while patting him down. I wanted to see you fight for starters. Didn't get a good enough idea before you decided to end our tryst back in the north. But I want it from an outside perspective this time, with the added benefit of testing my new recruits, or at least 2 of them. And the other? Esdeath rose to her feet, looking the Soul Reaper in his eyes. I want to see the world you inhabit, she admitted. I want to see the enemies you fight, the work you do. I want to see the Shinigami in action. She backed away from him. He was not cheating, merely used a unique style and technique that is unknown to the Empire. However, he has agreed to a rematch fight since you all came for a show. This time, he'll actually fight," she announced to the public, earning a round of cheers and applause. This time, Ichigo saw ice forming at the feet of the people. However, since every other competitor is down, Wave and Kurom, come up here and fight, the general ordered as the two Jaegers took the stage. I'm getting an odd sense of deja vu, Ichigo thought as he examined the two, reminding him of Tatsumi and Akam respectively. He kept a hand on one of his Zanpakuto and reinforced his hands and feet, sensing their strength but not wanting to kill them. Wave unsheathed a short black cutlass while Kurom had a long katana, similar to Akame's own tegu. Ichigo immediately sensed something very wrong with Kurom's sword, almost like there were voices crying out for release. He ran out of time for guessing when Esdeath made the call. "Begin," she ordered, prompting Wave to charge straight at the hybrid. The boy swung his blade, purposefully slow enough for him to think Ichigo had enough time to block it with his own blade. Instead, the Soul Reaper caught the blade and tossed him aside. Kurom was clearly the more aggressive of the two and went for a killing strike directly at Ichigo's neck. He once again blocks the blade with his bare hand, but this time he heard something crying out to him very clearly. He forgot the fight entirely and focused on the sword, now convinced it was a tegu, and knocked Kurom back with a solid strike to her gut. This blade Ichigo listened, hearing 5 different voices crying out for freedom. He gripped the sword blade with both hands, intent on shattering the weapon and freeing the trapped souls, before getting sucker punched in the face by a figure in black armor. Why does that resemble Incursio? He thought after shaking off the sudden blow. The tegu was taken from him and returned to Kurom's hands, who then clutched it desperately. "You all right, Kurom?" Wave asked from inside his armor, Kurom managing to put up a strong front. "Never thought I'd have to pull out my tegu for something like this. He's definitely no joke." Ichigo worked his jaw for a bit, getting rid of the sudden shock of the surprise attack he suffered. "I'll keep his attention. You aim for any opening I can make. Ready?" The pair planned before Ichigo flashed in front of Wave. "Wah!" He started before the hybrid threw an Ikatsu punch into his gut. Wave felt like his ribs were about to shatter from the strike, and was sent flying through the walls between the audience and the arena and through the walls around the courtyard. Kurom was about to attack herself, but was stopped when the Soul Reaper shot Kyoka Suijutsu out of the sheath like a bullet and nailed her in the stomach, stopping her in mid-flight. "What is that sword of yours?" Ichigo growled, still hearing the cries from the blade, as Kurom fell to the ground. Wave, to his stubborn credit, came flying at Ichigo again. The Shinigami summoned his Zanpakuto to his hand and swung at the armored youth as he fell toward him, Kyoka sparking against the armor before slowly biting through. Before he could cut Wave and do any more damage, Ichigo let go of the sword, punched him in the chest. Once again, Wave was shot backwards, but not before Ichigo caught his sword and pried it free. Before he could continue, he was trapped in a block of ice. "Thank you everyone for your assistance," Esdeath called out, making her way on stage and next to the frozen hybrid. "This man happens to be a person of high interest to the Empire, and this whole tournament was a trap to lure him out and eventually capture him. He is quite crafty and dangerous. Escape now, and everyone here dies." She whispered to Ichigo, knowing he could hear her through the ice. "Sorry if the show wasn't to your liking, but you can all expect a full reimbursement on your admission fees. My assistants, Run and Dr. Stylish, will return your money. Everyone else, let's get him back to our headquarters," she ordered, letting 2 of her soldiers get mobbed while the others came to retrieve Ichigo. The entire time, she admired the fierce and defiant glare in his eyes. Illustrated Guide to Assassination. Shiel's Zanpakuto Retrieval. "I'll catch yo!" the girl shouted before tripping and falling on some rocks. This was her 5th time doing so while chasing Merrick for the day. Merrick waited for the girl to get back up because the point was chasing, not hide and seek. When she didn't, he got a little concerned and went over to check on her. The second he got within a foot of her, she sprung up and made a grab for him. "Finally, I succeeded," she shouted, singing her victory. "Yes, you managed to rip my pants off," Merrick said dryly, the Asuachi gripped tightly in his hand, and missing some clothes below his waist. Shield dropped to her knees and started crying. "Hey, it's not that bad. You've got some nice reflexes and grip strength to do that," he said, trying to cheer her up, which wasn't working. "The main point was to get you comfortable as a soul, and you seem as lively as when you were alive." Still nothing. I'll give you the sword and not mention this to Ichigo. Okay? Okay. She sniffed, finally taking her future Zanpakuto in hand. Shield's next training. So, when I said get her something to practice with, why this? Ichigo watching Shield run from elephant-sized hollows that Merrick captured. Well, didn't you say optimal soul growth happened when the subject was in a life or death situation? The Arankar returned. That's still an Esuachi. Not even a Zanpakuto, and I'd feel safer throwing her against something she can actually fight. Ichigo scolded as they continued to watch Shield run and scream. I think it's a miracle she didn't trip yet. Shinigami and Special Police. Jaeger HQ. So, to say that the majority of the Special Police Force was confused would be an understatement, not expecting their first mission to turn out as such. Esdeath had the frozen Ichigo brought to their base while the Jaegers, Sans, Stylish, and Run, watched in puzzlement while she admired the man in the ice. What's going on, Captain? Balls finally asked. Who is this Ichigo person and why did we need such an elaborate trap? That boy is not human, Honest shouted, coming into the headquarters with Stylish and Run in tow. The former having several tools for sample extraction ready and looking absolutely ecstatic, while the latter was just very curious. You've really outdone yourself this time, General. To successfully capture the capital's own Reaper, he said, struggling between his excitement at victory and a calm smugness that the biggest obstacle was out of his way. The carcase of such a powerful being would offer a massive boon to the Empire, and more importantly to him. Maybe even the keys to immortality itself was within his grasp, the man thought while reaching out to the hybrid while Stylish prepared to drill through the ice. That's not smart, Esdeath warned, though it was ignored. Just as she expected, Ichigo's arms broke free with his veins glowing crimson and struck at the two men. Stylish got his hand and tool crushed in Ichigo's right hand while his left quickly dislocated Honest's wrist, shoulder, then grabbed his skull in a crushing grip. A second later, the ice fell off of Ichigo as he shook himself free. I agreed to come along by your terms, Esdeath, but I didn't agree to this. The Soul Reaper growled as the two began to wail in pain. You should know, I'm not particularly fond of being a test subject without consent. He lightened up his grip and both men fell to the floor, clutching their still throbbing hand and head, and Merrick came in through the door. Well, if I need consent, Stylish started in between pained squeals, then may I have some Sam? The Arankar kicked the doctor right out the door. So you running after him? My answer is no, Ichigo plainly said, swiping the odd crown Honest had on his head. A ring with 3 black diamonds. I will not allow you to have me in any experiments. I've had to send plenty of failed test subjects to their much-needed rest, and I personally don't trust your scientists. Is this a tegu? Certainly has a feel of power to it, the Reaper thought as he examined the trinket, sitting himself in a chair. Also, I'm still going to have to punish you for this, Esdeath. Just not here because I'd like to avoid collateral damage. And that is very much appreciated, Lord Shinigami, Honest said, finally getting back up. I do hope you were successful in your duties. His Majesty has been making an effort to try to preserve life in the capital, but are you sure you should make such compassion known? It would be a shame if death itself were to, he was saying while Ichigo and Merrick shared a glance, before Ichigo poked his finger toward Honest. Merrick immediately punched the fat man in the exact spot Ichigo pointed. Not enough to kill him but definitely knock the wind out. I said I'd like to avoid collateral damage, not that I wouldn't fight when push comes to shove. Merrick returned to his king's side and waited. Now, Esdeath, you said you wanted to see the world through the eyes of a soul, correct? He returned his vision to the icy general, who smiled. Yes indeed, and my Jaegers are a fellow offering if they pass your test, she announced, shocking all the humans in the room, even Sir Yu and Stylish who just returned. There is a great chance that we may die in the line of duty, fighting against the enemies of the Empire. Either we pass on to a peaceful rest or join our resident Shinigami in the service of something greater. I fully plan on doing the latter when this war is over, but your choices are your own. Some seem to ponder the possibility, partially convinced of Ichigo's divinity after surviving being frozen solid and throwing people around without touching them. Kirom was clutching her sword tightly, terrified of what the Soul Reaper would do to the friends she refused to let rest because of the Tegu's power. Ichigo hummed as he appeared in front of her, staring deep into her black eyes. "You remind me of the Wild One," he said, trying to be vague so that others wouldn't understand. Kurome's eyes, however, widened in a sense of recognition. "I'll have to ask Akame about this girl. Even their names sound alike," he thought before his phone and soul tracker vibrated in his pocket, which he left off since reaching this world until he made Shiel a soul reaper. The idea was that she was the standard level of strength for future possible recruits. He pulled it out to check, and it was pointing out to the opening of the Empire's Grand Canal and further into the waters. "Lucky me, I hope. Looks like something has come up. I'm going to check it out." "What about letting me come?" Esdeath suddenly asked. "This is related to your duty, is it not?" Ichigo tossed the possible tegu he had onto the couch, keeping an eye on it all the same by rise he sense. "I don't yet have the means to let you do that, short of killing you, Esdeath," he said, making note of the Prime Minister subtly taking the crown back. He had a feeling of distress ever since Ichigo took it that only calmed down by a fraction when he reclaimed it. The possibility of that crown being a tegu went up. "I'll do it when I have the time." Just as he was about to leave, a messenger appeared in the doorway. "Is there an Ichigo Kurosaki here?" he asked, Ichigo raising his hand. "His Majesty would like to request your presence at your earliest convenience, sir." Noted. Ichigo took off his gigi ring and disappeared from human sight shortly before leaving with Merrick in tow. "Head back to base and continue training Shiel. Thanks for coming as we planned." "Of course, my lord," he said just before sighing. "Can't wait till that girl can hold her own so I can take my naps again." The Arrancar made his way back to Night Raid's base while Ichigo continued on to the waters, where a fight was taking place. Over the cruise ship. "The big ones always tend to bring trouble, don't they?" Ichigo asked, floating over the cruise ship, a massive vessel with a dragon's head at the helm. On the deck were dozens of unconscious forms of various people. Someone that was split in half with a soul floating a bit above that was cheering an ally apparently. Tatsumi was injured and clutching his stomach, and Bulat was crossing blades with an older man. "Do I know that guy from somewhere?" he wondered as the fight continued and a third person, about Tatsumi's age, appeared. "Where have I seen them?" "Secret skill," the older man yelled, despite a deep cut in his stomach. "Blades of blood," he roared as his blood shot at Bulat like bullets. Some he deflected, others piercing into his flesh. "He's a stubborn one, I'll give him that," the hybrid said before descending, believing that the fighting was either over or close to being. As he dropped to the ship, he grabbed onto the floating soul. "Okay, time. 2. Huh. He just barely recognized the man, but the man clearly remembered Ichigo. "You," he said, pointing a trembling hand at the Soul Reaper. "You're that Shinigami that General Esdeath is so infatuated with." "I am. And you are?" "I'm Deidara of the Three Beasts, Esdeath's personal guard," he proudly proclaimed, reaching for a weapon that was no longer there. "In the name of my master, I'll... He kept reaching until he remembered that he was dead and in the presence of a death god. It wouldn't have made any difference even if you had your Tegu Deidara. The soul of the older man said after his mortal life ended, somewhat struggling in the transition. "We were all there and watched as even Lady Esdeath was brought low by him. None of us can fare any better than the general." He walked up to Ichigo and bowed in respect. "Please forgive my colleague, all of us in the Three Beasts have our own reasons to follow our general. She saved my life, for example, so while I don't like some of my actions, I still did so out of loyalty to my savior." "River's right," Deidara admitted. "I thought I was the strongest, until she proved me wrong. I respected her power and strength." "And what about that one?" Ichigo asked, pointed at the now buffed-up blonde man while Bulat was yelling at Tatsumi to focus. "He respects Esdeath as the greater sadist," Deidara told him. "Kid collects faces. From people that are still alive. It's creepy as hell." The three shuddered at the odd and sick hobby of the boy named Niao as Tatsumi called upon the power of the Tegu Incursio. The armor of the Tegu manifested as a giant avatar before it began shifting into something more beast-like. That thing. It's still alive, Ichigo realized while watching the armor change in a mixture of awe and horror. Awe at the creature's life force and horror at what life must be like for it. The next exchange of blows was the last as Tatsumi and Niao punched at each other. with Niao getting sent right into a wall on the ship and made a crater before falling to the ground dead. Stay here, all of you. I've something I need to do. He put on his Gigi ring just as Tatsumi dispelled his armor and ran back to Bulat. Ichigo? Him too? Really? Tatsumi said, tears welling up in his eyes as Bulat died. I can't even say goodbye this time, can I? Ichigo looked to the side as Bulat got himself together, now dealing with the fact he was dead. We just lost Shield. Now bro, why do they have to? Punch him. Bulat said, knowing that he couldn't do so anymore. Thus, Ichigo punched Tatsumi right on top of his head. Before either could say anything else, the hybrid held up a finger. Tatsumi, I do not control when people die, he said as it began to rain. I don't even get to decide where they go afterward. All I do is send them to where they will go. I put souls to rest. Letting them say goodbye is a final courtesy that I don't have to actually do. I didn't have to allow Shield to say goodbye to Night Raid. I didn't need to let your two friends say their final goodbyes, or anyone for that matter. So why do I? It doesn't change the outcome of where they'll go. It doesn't change that they're dead. All it actually does is provide closure, which is all I can do, he shouted, scaring the assembled figures. I have been the most generous Shinigami of my entire ilk, because I don't hear of any other that bothers enough to give any soul any closure. Senna's words came back to him when they first helped that young boy's soul find his dad despite his disinterest at first. Now Bulat has some final words for you. After that, get back to your mission. Stop crying. I'll speak for him, Ichigo said, turning to the dead assassin and nodding. Right, Tatsumi, don't worry, he said with Ichigo relaying the words. The kind of power you just showed, you'll surpass me in no time. I can't think of anyone else I'd rather pass on Incursio to. Train hard, make Incursio evolve further than I could ever hope to, and make sure you keep your promise, Tatsumi. Survive for your sake, for your village, and for your promise to Akame. He reached out a hand to place on Tatsumi's shoulder, which the boy somehow felt. I might not stick around, but I'll always be with you, lil bro. Tatsumi couldn't help but cry, and still promised his mentor that he'd keep pushing himself harder and harder. Ichigo removed his Gigi ring and marched back to Deidara and River, with a trembling Niao. All right, time to do this. Ichigo cracked his knuckle before pulling out one of his Zanpakuto. Before we start, I'm recruiting people to become Soul Reapers with me. This drew the expected surprise and hope from Niao that he was expecting. I have a war of my own that I'm facing, and I need to build my own forces. You will be trained, you will retain your memories, you will grow stronger than you ever could before, and Bulat, you can continue to watch over Tatsumi. The price, you will abandon old allegiances. The affairs you have with the living are over. So, you say you don't choose whether people go to hell or not, Niao said, stepping forward with some confidence. Can we still go to hell and punish the sinners? Ichigo's response was to tap his forehead and summon the gates of hell. Wait, I can be useful. I can serve you well. The chains wrapped around him and dragged him into the burning depths, shocking everyone but the Shinigami who had grown too used to seeing those doors opening. I do have standards, let that be known, Ichigo said as he looked to the remaining three. River stepped forward next. The fight was long gone in his eyes. I gave my life to my mistress. I've done things that I didn't do. Killed people that would have done well for the Empire because of the Prime Minister. And I won't run from my just dues, he declared. I'm done fighting Shinigami. Heaven or hell, send me on my way. Ichigo tapped his head, and the blue light glow as he slowly faded. Maybe we'll have that drink next time we see each other, Bulat. If we ever meet. He smiled before disappearing, leaving the two warriors, who were looking quite conflicted. I've sworn my life to the general because of her strength, so I don't know if I'd be willing to abandon her just like that. Ichigo looked skyward and swung his sword, cleaving the clouds apart and ending the rain and overcast. Both Bulat and Deidara could only stare, completely stunned. I will follow you wherever you command. That left Bulat, whom Ichigo looked at expectantly. Honestly, working with any former member of the Empire's army is gonna leave a bad taste in my mouth. And I don't know if I can toss aside my previous loyalties to Night Raid and Revolution, the warrior admitted, shaking his head in thought. But I promise to watch over Tatsumi, and I will keep it. I will keep to your rules, but I'll be keeping an eye on Tatsumi as well. Back at the capital, Later in the day, Ichigo dropped off his new recruits back at the night raid hideout, told Merrick to watch them, and sealed them in his underground base with a high-level barrier spell with the same training Shiel went through. Shiel was happy to have an old teammate of hers with her now, but had also shed a few tears that he was now dead like her. The last thing Ichigo did at his base was retrieve the other thing he was working on, a glove with the soul ejection Kaido laced into it, and grabbed some hollow bait. If Esdeath wanted to see his world, she'll see all he had to show. His power, the hollows, and how she'd stack up against them. With that done, he reappeared at the Jaeger's HQ. Soul Reaper, Run called out, being the only other one in the meeting room. Stylish and Suyu were working on patching up the former's hand. Wave was helping Balls cook and bring dinner to Kurom, who locked herself in her room for some reason, and Esdeath was in a meeting. I was hoping to speak with you alone. I have some questions, the man said, looking around the room to make sure they were alone. I have a request, and am willing to pay. He started before Esdeath came in with the other Jaegers. Listen up, people, our first big job as the Jaegers is here, she announced, heading for the table in the middle of the room. Run seemed agitated, but joined his teammates at the table. Nice to see you here, Ichigo. Are you going to join us on this mission? You'll have to tend to them after we're done anyway, and it would be a perfect chance for me to see the spirit side of things, she said with a smile. Ichigo wanted to wipe that smirk off her face, but waited. That would come later. I wonder what kind of hollows will appear, Ichigo thought to himself, rolling the bait around between his fingers. Esdeath continued to brief her soldiers and ask their resolve. Stylish, for some reason, felt necessary to denounce Ichigo as any sort of god, and that Esdeath was a more fitting goddess. Right. You guys go on ahead. I said I'd meet with the Emperor, he said before flashing away to do just that. Ichigo appeared in the throne room, with Honest, Budo, some new old guy, and Makoto discussing the affairs of state. Before anyone could react, he was directly in front of the Emperor and slipping the spirit bracelet on the kid before removing his own Gige ring. Okay, what is it, kid? Was that wise to do? Makoto asked, still trying to catch up mentally to what just happened. The look from Ichigo prompted him to continue. Right, I was wondering if you could get Night Raid to give us the Tegu Spectator. If they need a reason, tell them it's to protect the former Prime Minister Chowry, who now serves on my staff, he said, pointing at the new older man while Budo tried to restore order in the palace. Honest noted him as a threat to his authority and power, and he was always a good and honest man to the people. I'm sure he's a person of interest that the rebels would rather see alive. And why would they trust you? I have been vague about you being freed from Honest, Ichigo asked, making Makoto reach into his pocket. This is the Emperor's seal, he said, handing the golden stamp to the Shinigami. Only high-ranking officials and other generals will recognize that, and it is always kept on the Emperor. Show it to whoever it is that you talk to. Ichigo bounced the gold seal a few times in his hand before pocketing it. I'll see what I can do. With that, Ichigo took the bracelet back and left the throne room, leaving the job of explaining things to Budo and Makoto, which he doubted that either appreciated having to do, but his concerns laid elsewhere. He traced Esdeath's presence to a high ledge overlooking the fortress that the Jaegers were tasked with eliminating as a bandit hideout. Did I miss anything? Nope, just in time to watch them in action, Esdeath answered, not even shocked at Ichigo's sudden appearance. How will they fare in your eyes? Ichigo wondered the same as he watched them attack the fortress. The first up was the cyborg girl with the dog Tegu, Suyu if he remembered correctly. She certainly proved adaptive with the different weapons she could switch out her arms with. Mayuri would have a field day with her if she let him do the same body modification. But one look at that savage and predatory grin told the Soul Reaper enough. That girl was a murderer, and with how she always used the word justice for every other word probably means she's unstable. She'd probably decide to kill souls rather than use Kanso because she'd consider herself the judge. So she's out, he decided as he moved on to the doctor. Stylish was more of a support type, though Uruhara and Mayuri have proven how dangerous a smart man can be, so he'd probably do well in Squad 12. However, he seemed like this disturbing mix of Yumichika's aesthetic demands and Mayuri's morality and desire to experiment. He'd require more analysis, but Ichigo doubted he could stomach the man being a Soul Reaper. He displayed modified humans, but was Project Spearhead any better? Maybe, but that wasn't an argument he wanted to have. Next were Kurom and Wave, who once again seemed like a weaker Akame and stronger Tatsumi. The resemblance was still odd to the hybrid. Balls and Run were the last, and they mainly showcased the power of their Tegu. Nothing he couldn't do with his Kaido or Quincy bow against Ball's flamethrower and Run's wings. Well, Esdeath asked as her team finished up and started to return to their rendezvous. Ichigo didn't answer as some of the newly made souls already started turning into hollows, even attacking each other. Being the person he was, he went into action, grabbing Esdeath by the waist, causing her to blush for the first time in a while before flashing down to the Jaegers. "Catch, spiritual bitch slap," he said, tossing the general toward her subordinates before donning the soul ejection glove and pushing Esdeath's soul from her body. "She's alive, just comatose while her soul is out of her," he quickly explained before turning to soul form and making quick work of the spirits in the base. "Well?" he asked, reappearing before Esdeath, who was watching in shock. That, how fast are you?" she gasped, suddenly noting how hard it was to breathe. "What is this?" Tegu users seemed to adapt more easily to being souls, Ichigo thought as she already began to steady her breathing. More research into the spiritual requirement of Tegu. "This is the first time you became a spirit, is it not? You need to relearn how to live in a new body, breathing first and movement second." She nodded in understanding as she quickly reached a more comfortable state. "As for how fast, not too sure. I've never bothered to measure it, but it's never fast enough." He took out the bait and crushed it. "Now watch Esdeath, this is my life as a soul reaper," he said as dozens upon dozens of holes opened in the sky with hundreds of hollows, and one massive tear slowly appearing. With honest. "Damn that soul reaper," he raged, not even able to enjoy his usual snacks after Chowry talked Makoto into making cutbacks on certain expenses to fund a new project to clean up the district. Removing litter, repairing buildings, providing medical care, removing drugs, and all out of the secret funds he had from bribe money and tax evasion. He had a hand in this, I know it. The problem is, he was losing his resources. Night Raid is killing off his pawns. Budo would start making arrests if he made a move in the wrong direction. Esdeath is too infatuated with that Soul Reaper, and he's losing his grasp on the Child Emperor. If he doesn't do something and soon, then his carefully laid out plans will be completely unsalvageable. Maybe it's time I have those two move, he suddenly decided. He should be close to done with his travels and the other is just one position away from taking over that little cult. Just need to move quickly. He began writing a pair of secret letters, one to a man named Sura and one to a Bollock. Illustrated Guide to the Special Police. Jaeger's reaction to Ichigo. Wave, Tegus, I can deal with. Quirky teammates, I can deal with. Crazy boss lady, fine. A literal reaper of souls, what the hell is going on? The capital is insane. Kurom, he's going to take them away. He's going to take them all away. I can't let that happen. I can't let them go. Sister, I'm scared. Why can't we be together again like we used to be? Run, if I can get his help, then I can certainly achieve my vengeance. But can I persuade a god of death to help me? I know I have to change the empire, but I must avenge my students. Please Shinigami, grant me your favor and help remove a monster from this world. Balls, so that was the god of death. I know I shouldn't think like this, but the general is right and I may die in the line of duty. I should ask him what hell is like so I can be prepared, because I know heaven won't have me. Suryu, I wonder if he'll let me join him if I die in the line of duty. That sounds good, serving justice to the sinners for all eternity. But then why did Captain Ogre have to die? Stylish, he's certainly a cutie, but just so not my type at the same time. I want nothing more than to experiment on him, a genuine godly entity. But how? Maybe I'll strike when he's in human form. He should be vulnerable. I'll need to prepare my army. All of my dear experiments should be able to help. Esdeath. I want his babies. 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 Ichigo, I'm not a Jaeger. Leave me alone.